Number 8. Amanda Meyers.
Does it have to go that far? I'm a cop too. I know how that works.
In February of 2020, the police in Parma, Ohio, were dispatched to a local bar after receiving reports of a minor traffic accident in the parking lot. Upon their arrival, law enforcement encountered Amanda Meyers, a Kelly's Island police officer who claimed to have been working a side job at the bar that day. Meyers, who'd reportedly been involved in the fender bender, proceeded to name-drop other public officials in an attempt to validate her story to the other officers and prevent them from questioning her level of intoxication. She stated that she knew the owner of the bar and indicated that his brother is the prosecutor. He knows the mayor. We're all cool. Meyers admitted to having 2 or 3 drinks over the course of the day, but refused to submit to any sobriety tests. Despite her attempts to use her law enforcement position to avoid getting into trouble, the 29-year-old woman was ultimately taken into custody. She was charged with 3 misdemeanors: operating a vehicle under the influence, refusal with a prior conviction, and reasonable control. Subsequent reports indicated that Meyers had only been convicted of the latter charge, but it wasn't made clear what the extent of her consequent penalties were. Number 7. Martin Hyde. On February the 14th of 2022, Florida police officer Julia Beskin pulled over a vehicle in Sarasota that she'd clocked traveling at nearly 30 miles per hour over the posted speed limit. Beskin approached the car and informed its driver, Republican congressional candidate Martin Hyde, of his alleged infraction. In an attempt to avoid a ticket, the man indicated that he knew the police chief, telling Beskin that she was making an unwise career decision by pulling him over. The officer then told Hyde that she didn't recognize him before calling a traffic stop in to her dispatcher. Beskin claimed that the man was being extremely uncooperative and told the dispatcher that she'd given him a total of 3 tickets: 1 for speeding, 1 for failing to produce a valid registration, and another for texting while driving. In the officer's body cam footage, the congressional candidate was later shown insulting Beskin's immigrant status, demanding to speak with her supervisor, and repeatedly accusing her of lying about his traffic violations. In a further display of indignation, Hyde attempted to use his perceived influence to get out of receiving the tickets, asking Beskin if she knew she was dealing with a congressional candidate. In the incident's aftermath, Hyde uploaded an apologetic social media post in which he admitted, "I have faults, and one of them is to be overly aggressive on occasion when I'm challenged." On August the 23rd of 2022, Hyde lost in the primary of Florida's 16th congressional district election, only garnering roughly 14% of the vote. Number 6. Darlene Bradley. The mayor of a small city in central Florida was taken into police custody in December of 2017 after it emerged that she'd been using dead people's disabled parking permits to park at City Hall. The Polk County Sheriff's Office had initiated an investigation into the suspect, Davenport Mayor Darlene Bradley, after she'd been filmed parking in a handicapped parking space outside the government building. Investigators obtained a search warrant for Bradley's home, which led to the discovery of 2 disabled parking permits that had been issued to individuals who had already passed away. The mayor was consequently arrested on felony charges of using a deceased person's identification as well as possessing an altered or counterfeit decal. Those charges were ultimately dismissed after Bradley agreed to a plea deal in which she was sentenced to 6 months of probation and ordered to pay roughly $420 in fines. Number 5. Rodolfo Lopez Ibarra. In December of 2016, Mexican authorities apprehended Rodolfo El Nito Lopez Ibarra, the regional leader of the Beltran Leyva cartel in Nuevo Leon, Sinaloa, and Mexico City. At the time of the powerful criminal's detainment, the police also reportedly seized a level 6 armored SUV, a .38 caliber handgun, and $22,000 in cash. While he was being taken into custody, Lopez Ibarra allegedly offered law enforcement a $500,000 bribe in exchange for his release. The arresting officers refused, to which the cartel leader responded by threatening to use his criminal influence to have them murdered. The incident marked the second documented occasion in which Lopez Ibarra had attempted to bribe the police. Back in 2009, the man had been arrested along with 12 of his gunmen right before taking off from the airport in Acapulco on board a Cessna airplane. As he was being arrested with multiple firearms and a grenade in his possession, Lopez Ibarra told the officials he'd pay them $1 million if they let him go. When that proposition had been refused, the enraged drug lord vowed to exact revenge against the officers and soldiers, telling them, "You don't know who you are messing with. I am the new plaza boss." Number 4. Sandra Cunningham. On the morning of March the 4th of 2021, a New Jersey state senator was pulled over by the police after colliding with a pair of cars parked near her Jersey City residence. Prior to the incident, then 70-year-old Sandra Cunningham had represented the state's 31st legislative district since 2007. Throughout her interaction with law enforcement, the woman attempted to use her political influence and connections to avoid being punished for her actions. Immediately upon initiating the traffic stop, the officer at the scene noted that Cunningham was displaying clear signs of intoxication. She reportedly dropped a collection of cards on the ground when trying to produce her ID, then had trouble clearly stating her address and even confessed to feeling unsteady. While performing a field sobriety test, the lawmaker denied having struck the parked vehicles, instead claiming to have hit a snowbank while making a turn. When the officer told Cunningham that she was being taken into custody, the state senator asked for Jersey City's Public Safety Director, James Shea, by name. Her request wasn't honored, however, and she was arrested on a DWI charge shortly thereafter. In May of 2022, after 14 months of legal proceedings, Cunningham's charges were dismissed when prosecutors decided there wasn't enough evidence to prove their case. Number 3. Humberto Benitez Travino. In the spring of 2013, it was reported that the daughter of a Mexican government official had thrown a tantrum after the owner of Maximo Bistro in Mexico City told her she couldn't be seated right away without a reservation. The young woman, identified as Andrea Benitez Gonzalez, proceeded to get even angrier when a vacant table was subsequently offered to customers who'd been waiting longer than her. For their perceived mistreatment of her, Benitez Gonzalez threatened the restaurant with governmental repercussions, indicating that her father, Humberto Benitez Travino, was the federal attorney general for consumer protection. Only hours after the incident had occurred, federal inspectors arrived at the establishment with official suspended signs per Benitez Travino's orders. The restaurant reportedly had 2 of its permits suspended, one regarding reservations and the other regarding liquor sales. The episode sparked outrage among the general public, which criticized Benitez Travino for what was widely considered an abuse of power on his part. The man's daughter was also given the derisive nickname Lady Profeco. In the wake of the incident, the following month, Benitez Travino was fired from his senior position within the Mexican government by President Enrique Peña Nieto, despite publicly apologizing for his retaliatory overreaction towards Maximo Bistro. Number 2. Monica Youngblood. New Mexico State Representative Monica Youngblood was arrested on suspicion of driving under the influence of alcohol on May the 20th of 2018. In the late hours of the evening, the 41-year-old woman had been stopped at a sobriety checkpoint in Albuquerque. Officers immediately noted that Youngblood's eyes were bloodshot, and she smelled strongly of alcohol, while also indicating that she was slurring her speech. The politician was asked to perform 4 separate field sobriety tests, all of which she failed, and she subsequently refused to submit to a breathalyzer. In nearly 40 minutes of police body cam footage released in the traffic stop's aftermath, Youngblood was shown tearfully pleading with the officers not to arrest her. She also attempted to use her political positions as a legislator to appeal to the officers and escape criminal charges, stating, "I always stood up for you guys." It later emerged that in her capacity as a state representative, Youngblood had been a staunch supporter of harsher sentences for DUI offenders. She was taken into custody and, following a nearly 4-hour bench trial, convicted of aggravated drunken driving. Youngblood was consequently sentenced to 48 hours in jail, 1 year of probation, mandatory use of an ignition interlock for 1 year, attendance at DUI school, 24 hours of community service, and payment of court costs and fees. She ultimately lost her re-election bid to her Democratic challenger in November of 2018. Number 1. Kwame Kilpatrick. Kwame Kilpatrick was elected as the 72nd mayor of Detroit in 2002 after spending the previous 5 years as a member of the state's House of Representatives. The Michigan native's tenure in office, which lasted for 2 terms, was fraught with constant controversy and allegations of misconduct. During his first year, Kilpatrick was accused of organizing a wild party involving exotic dancers at the Manoogian Mansion, a city-owned property in which the mayor of Detroit resides. At one point that evening, Kilpatrick's wife arrived home unexpectedly and proceeded to physically assault one of the dancers. The mayor and other police officials were subsequently investigated for allegedly abusing their power to cover up the details of the party. In April of 2003, an exotic dancer named Tamara Green, who was said to have been in attendance at the Manoogian Mansion event, was murdered. Prior to her death, Green had been set to testify on record about the party, and it was thus theorized that she'd been killed in a deliberate hit by a member of the Detroit Police Department. To stop that from happening, Kilpatrick's tumultuous mayoral career ultimately culminated with his resignation in 2008 after he'd been accused of lying during the police whistleblower trial that resulted from the Manoogian Mansion ordeal. According to court records, Kilpatrick had falsely testified that he didn't have an affair with his chief of staff and had also allegedly given misleading testimony about the dismissal of a deputy police chief. He was convicted of perjury as well as obstruction of justice and served 99 days in jail. 2 years later, Kilpatrick served additional time behind bars for a probation violation before eventually being indicted on new felony charges in connection to what was described as a pattern of extortion, bribery, and fraud by some of the city's most prominent officials. The former mayor was ultimately convicted of 24 counts, including mail fraud, wire fraud, and racketeering, and was consequently sentenced to 28 years in federal prison. In January of 2021, President Donald Trump commuted Kilpatrick's sentence, allowing him to obtain release 20 years early without having his conviction vacated. He was, however, still subject to almost $4.8 million in restitution payments, as well as the 3 years of probation handed down in his original sentence.
What's your name?
I didn't give it.
I know. I want to know what your name is.
I don't care what you want.
Well,
that's not the policy.
The Secret Service.
I don't care.
Us to identify
then why don't they come out here and talk to me?
They will in a moment.
Okay, go ahead. Am I being detained?
In the fall of 2022, a video uploaded to YouTube showed an interaction between an unnamed photographer and Sergeant Juan Bentes of the Fort Wayne Police Department in Indiana. The latter approached the man as he was taking pictures before a rally held for Donald Trump in the area. Bentes asked that the man identify himself, claiming that he was acting under instructions from the Secret Service. But the latter pointed out that he was under no obligation to do so unless he was detained or charged with a crime. He then tried to walk away, but Bentes prevented him from doing so by putting his arm on him, an action that was met with protest by the photographer, who sternly and repeatedly asked the officer not to touch him.
What's your name?
Am I being detained?
What is your name?
Am I being detained?
What is your
I'm going to
name?
assume no.
What's that?
I'm going to say, hey, don't you touch me. Don't you touch me. Public servant,
What?
don't touch.
What?
Look, public
What's your name?
servant,
Don't
you don't
touch
touch
me.
me.
All right?
You don't touch me.
Or else what?
You don't touch me.
Or else what?
I will file a complaint.
You can file a complaint.
Don't
but
touch
I'm going
me.
to identify you.
As their interaction progressed, Bentes called for backup, but the man continued to act in accordance with his rights and, in spite of repeated requests from law enforcement, didn't give them his name. He relentlessly asked, "Am I being detained or am I free to go?" before the power-tripping officer eventually allowed him to walk away. The photographer then told Bentes that he would be filing a complaint, to which the officer replied that it wouldn't be the first. Number 6. Gustavo Alvina. An officer of the New Mexico State Police conducted a traffic stop for speeding in Las Cruces on April the 7th of 2021. In the vehicle, Officer Gustavo Alvina encountered a group of female teenagers, one of whom was behind the wheel and didn't have her license. The cop asked her to step out and test her sobriety after he spotted empty beer cans in the car and determined that the group smelled of alcohol. He told the 18-year-old driver who'd been crying, "I see alcohol in your eyes," and conducted several more tests. Alvina concluded that some of the teens' parents had to be called to the scene to retrieve them because there was alcohol in the car, and he assumed none of them was fit to drive. One of the teens, identified as 18-year-old Kaylee, then asked the cop how he knew they were all drunk, stating, "It's empty cans, sir." In the moments that followed, Alvina grabbed her by the arm, took her to the back of his cruiser, and told her that she was arrested and would go to jail.
I'm sorry, there's no proof of full cans? How, no.
Come here. Come here.
No.
Come here.
Sir, I'm just asking you.
Tired of you, okay? You argue too much, you're gonna get in my car. Yes.
No, sir, I'm just asking you a question.
Sit down in the back.
Sir, I'm just asking you a question.
Sit down in the back.
No, I'm just asking you a question.
By then, one of the teens' mothers had arrived at the scene, and Alvina claimed that he was taking Kaylee into custody for being kind of rude and arguing the whole time. He allowed the others to leave and then told Kaylee, who was crying and apologizing repeatedly, that he had to handcuff her before going to the station. When the teen asked the cop about what she'd done, Alvina claimed she was the only one with the attitude. He gave Kaylee permission to talk to her mother and then spoke to the woman himself. While the latter was telling Alvina that her daughter was unstable and might have a mental breakdown, Kaylee started banging her head against the partition, as recorded by the vehicle surveillance cameras. In spite of her state of distress, Alvina told the teen's mother she looks fine. He then dragged Kaylee outside the vehicle and handcuffed her, claiming he was doing it so that she wouldn't hurt herself. The teen eventually calmed down and Alvina called an ambulance to check on her before she was booked into jail on the charge of minor in possession of alcohol. Number 5. Kevin Morris. Following an internal investigation carried out in July of 2019, a police officer in Montgomery County, Maryland was charged with second-degree assault and misconduct in office. The accusations against Kevin Morris stem from the arrest of 19-year-old Arnaldo Andres Pessoa on July the 3rd of 2019. The latter had been contacted by an undercover officer on Snapchat, and a deal had been arranged for the purchase of psychedelic mushrooms. A meetup was arranged at a McDonald's where Morris and other officers in plain clothes approached Pessoa. They told the teen that he was under arrest, but he resisted and was eventually taken down. After officers had handcuffed Pessoa on the sidewalk outside the McDonald's, Morris grabbed the teen's ear and forced his knee into his neck area, slamming his head into the pavement. A bystander recorded Morris, who was at the time in his early 30s, as he continued applying pressure to Pessoa's neck. The man was left with injuries to his face in the aftermath. He ultimately pleaded guilty to attempting to sell psilocybin mushrooms. Morris went to trial in December of 2019. He motivated his actions by saying that Pessoa had been spitting blood at him, thus putting him and his fellow officers at risk of contracting infectious diseases. Morris was found guilty of second-degree assault and given 2 years of probation. In 2020, Pessoa sued Morris and Montgomery County over the incident, but the matter was pending as of subsequent information released to the media. In 2021, Morris was given probation before judgment, a type of relief often afforded to people in Maryland with little to no criminal record who'd been convicted of relatively minor crimes. It meant that the previous guilty finding was cleared from his record and that he retained his position with the police department. Number 4. Arrest of Xiomara Garcia. Law enforcement in Westminster, California, received a call on April the 21st of 2021, accompanied by reports that a woman had been assaulted by a 34-year-old Xiomara Garcia. The victim had reportedly tried to rescue a dog from the neighborhood prior to the attack. Responding officers found that Garcia had an outstanding felony bench warrant for vandalism. They handcuffed her behind the back and called for paramedics after determining that the woman was under the influence of an unknown intoxicant. The officers later reported that Garcia became non-compliant and combative as they waited for the ambulance. Bystander video would show her falling backwards and seemingly kicking one of the 3 unnamed officers that were restraining her. The cop that was struck then punched Garcia twice in the face in rapid succession. One of the other officers then intervened to shield the woman from his colleague. Garcia was taken to a local hospital for a medical evaluation, but she wasn't reported to have suffered any injuries. She was arrested on suspicion of assault and battery, being under the influence of a controlled but unnamed substance, and resisting arrest. Updates indicated that the power-tripping cop who'd punched her was placed on administrative leave. Number 3. Brianna Strauss. In July of 2022, Officer Brianna Strauss of the Washington Federal Way Police Department uploaded a video to her TikTok in which she boasted about her privileges as a police officer. The woman used explicit language while telling users that they had to get out of the way if they saw an officer following behind them. Strauss went on to state, "I can run 90 miles an hour. You can't do that." The clip went viral after it resurfaced on Reddit later in the summer and eventually rose to over 300,000 views on YouTube. It also amassed millions of views on Twitter, where numerous users criticized Strauss for her perceived superiority. One commenter wrote, "The arrogance is disgusting," a sentiment that others echoed as well. The attention prompted Strauss's department to carry out an investigation into her disciplinary history, but it found no past issues with her behavior. The FDWP consequently determined that Strauss's TikTok violated their code of conduct, and she was suspended for 10 hours without pay. The decision generated further backlash from netizens who argued that the punishment had been too lenient. Number 2. Kendo Kinsey. Multiple officers of the NYPD went to a home in Harlem on August the 12th of 2022 to arrest 22-year-old Elvin James on an attempted murder charge. As shown by cell phone footage, law enforcement was met with resistance by several local residents. One of them was 19-year-old Tamani Crum, whom some sources identified as James's girlfriend. She ran up to NYPD Detective Kendo Kinsey and shoved him in the shoulder as they were standing face to face. The cop responded by throwing a forceful punch to Crum's head, which connected with an audible thud. The teenager was sent flying backwards and hit her head as she stiffly dropped to the sidewalk. She was recorded holding her face while laying on her back as a bystander was heard yelling at Kinsey, "Why would you do that? That's a little girl!" Crum, a Bronx resident, was taken into custody on charges of assault on a police officer, resisting arrest, and obstructing governmental administration. As the video gained attention online, a considerable degree of public outrage, including from Crum's mother, was directed towards Kinsey, accusing him of being on a power trip and using excessive force. Mayor Eric Adams spoke to the media and stated that the officers at the scene had shown great restraint, given the fact that people were interfering with the arrest of a man who was armed and wanted for attempted murder. Number 1. Johnny Kagel. In March of 2022, Rolando Reyes was taking photos at the scene of an accident in Lake Jackson, Texas. He was approached by Officer Johnny Kagel and asked if he had permission to be there. The man told him that he was allowed to be in a public space and take photos. Kagel then asked him to leave and Reyes refused, at which point the former called his colleague, Officer O. Mendoza, who agreed with his assessment of the situation. Kagel then claimed that it was illegal for Reyes to take photos of people's vehicles and license plates, which it wasn't.
What did you say now?
I asked you, why are you here?
I said I'm taking photos.
Okay. Are you allowed on this accident scene? That's what I'm asking you.
You're asking me if I'm allowed to be here?
Yes, sir.
Okay. What do you think?
Okay. I need you to leave, please.
I'm not going to leave.
Mendoza, your accident scene. He's taking pictures of other people's vehicles and license plates, which is against the law.
In fact, as their interaction progressed, a woman closer to the scene was recording it behind them, and the police didn't question her. Kagel then demanded that Reyes identify himself, and he declined, accusing the officers of trying to intimidate him. He also pointed to the fact that the cops should have been dealing with the accident behind them instead of harassing him. Kagel then moved closer to the man, accused him of interfering with an investigation, and demanded he leave. The officers then appeared to charge Reyes before the camera dropped and the video cut off. Reyes was arrested, but according to subsequent updates, he was released without being charged. An internal affairs investigation was launched that found the officers' actions were based on an erroneous understanding of the law. Kagel resigned during the course of the investigation, while Mendoza was given a period of unpaid leave and scheduled for remedial training. A clip went viral on social media in December of 2020, showing a man at a Circle K in the city of Elyria, Ohio, getting attacked while in the midst of a racist rant. As he was standing in line at the cash register, a belligerent white man launched a verbal tirade at a black man, insulting his mother and repeatedly calling him the N-word. The mouthy man told the target of his rant that he wasn't trying to disrespect him, but claimed that he could say the N-word all day, every day. He then repeated the slur when asking the man where he was from, to which the latter simply replied, "From here." As tensions escalated, the berated man grabbed a can of twisted tea, whereupon the harasser asked, "Are you going to smack me with that?" before repeatedly shouting, "Smack me." The berated man flipped the can, dropped it, and the other man tried to kick it away. Moments later, the former grabbed the can off the floor and struck his harasser in the head with it, applying such force that it exploded on impact and sent the ranting man stumbling backwards. The customer filming the incident was consequently heard saying, "Yeah, you got yours, buddy." The dazed man got up and charged the other man, but was taken down with a wrestling move and repeatedly punched in the head, as his victim-turned attacker facetiously asked him to call him the N-word again. The ranting racist was briefly held in a chokehold and asked if he was good, to which he replied affirmatively, before he was released and fell on his knees. Number 7. Ryan Kennedy and Jesse Jones. In the spring of 2022, a Miami couple were fought off and ended up in the Miami-Dade County Jail after a failed robbery. An unnamed 18-year-old male had been walking on a Miami Beach sidewalk with his sister-in-law when he was approached by Ryan Kennedy and Jesse Jones. The couple attacked the teenager in an attempt to take his iPhone 11, but he fought back. The 18-year-old landed a kick to Kennedy's head, which the witness who'd captured the incident later described as, "That was like some WWE stuff right there. Bruce Lee, you know." The victim's sister-in-law joined the conflict, and a wild brawl ensued, during which all four of them ended up grappling on the ground. The thieving couple's strikes were accompanied by hateful words, as Kennedy was captured on video saying, "Go back to Puerto Rico. You don't belong here, you immigrant," followed by racially charged expletives. As the altercation reached its climax, Jones was seen using her purse as a whip to strike the victims. The video ended with Kennedy shoving the teen, but also Jones, as he pushed her by the head, causing her to lose her balance and drop to the ground. The clip was seen by the police, and the couple were arrested for aggravated battery and strong-arm robbery. Jones's booking photo showed her with a swollen eye and multiple scratches she'd sustained in the fight. Number 6. Incident in U.S. store. In the fall of 2019, surveillance footage from a store in the U.S. captured an alleged white supremacist as he approached a black woman who was with a young child at the cash register. He reportedly called the woman a racial slur, prompting her to walk away. A black man who'd been standing a few feet from them and had watched the incident unfold blindsided the verbal aggressor with a powerful punch. The bystander landed a haymaker to the man's head, causing him to bend backwards and drop to the floor. As the alleged racist got back to his feet, he tried squaring up to the man who'd struck him. He was thus hit 4 additional times, with each punch being a potential knockout blow, if not for their rapid succession, which kept the staggered man upright. The 4th strike left him unconscious on the floor, splayed over various products, but he was eventually picked up by the man who'd attacked him and thrown towards the exit. Number 5. Vell Cook. 77-year-old Florida man Vell Cook walked into a Tampa Dunkin' Donuts in May of 2021 to complain about the lack of service he'd been receiving at the drive-thru. Cook was known to be regularly abusive and troublesome towards the establishment's employees. Upon being asked to leave, Cook, a white man, verbally abused 27-year-old employee Corey Pujols by calling him the N-word. Pujols asked the elderly man not to repeat the slur, When he did, the Dunkin' Donuts worker punched him in the jaw. Cook was knocked unconscious, fell and hit his head. He was rushed to the hospital with contusions on his brain and a skull fracture. He passed away from the injuries 3 days later. Pujols was arrested on the charge of manslaughter, to which he pleaded not guilty. Under a deal with Hillsborough County prosecutors, he eventually admitted the lesser charge of felony battery. He was ultimately sentenced to house arrest for 2 years in order to complete 200 hours of community service, in addition to undergoing anger management courses. According to prosecutors from the state attorney's office, several circumstantial factors were considered during sentencing, including the aggressive approach and despicable racial slur used by Cook, as well as Pujols' age, the fact that he hadn't intended to cause the man's death, and his lack of a criminal record. Number 4. American Airlines Center incident. In early February of 2023, an argument broke out involving two people who were attending an ice hockey game between the Dallas Stars and the Minnesota Wild at the American Airlines Center in Texas. None of the people involved were identified, but it was reported that the argument had been over seating. A clip which subsequently went viral would show a man wearing a dark polo t-shirt being confronted by another man sporting a mullet haircut and wearing a Dallas Stars jersey. As tensions escalated, the latter dared the other man to fight him, calling him the N-word. Moments later, the man in the polo t-shirt threw a thunderous punch to his berater's jaw that stunned him and caused him to fall backwards into the seats. The fan in the Stars jersey bounced back and tried to punch the other man, as did a similarly clad young woman, believed to be his girlfriend. They were both kept at bay, and before the two brawling sides were separated, the Stars fan was pinned down and called a little boy. He insisted that he hadn't done anything wrong and that the other man had attacked him. It wasn't made immediately clear if there were any criminal charges associated with the incident. While most users reacting to the viral video sided with the man who'd thrown the punch, calling it an appropriate reaction to the racially charged epithet, others argued that the Dallas fan was exercising his right to free speech and that his attacker should have been charged with assault. Number 3. Austin Dewan. 25-year-old Douglas Reddish and his girlfriend were sitting at an outdoor table at Benny's Burritos on Greenwich Avenue in Manhattan, New York City in July of 2013. An inebriated man, later identified as 31-year-old Austin Dewan, walked into their table. Reddish initially tried to help Dewan, but the latter called him a racial slur, thinking that the Good Samaritan was trying to fight him. Reddish punched Dewan with such force that he flew backwards and landed on the sidewalk. The man struck his head on the pavement and began bleeding heavily. One Benny's Burritos worker was quoted as saying, "He was out cold. I thought he was dead." According to reports from witnesses at the scene, Reddish tried to hit Dewan again, but was held back by employees. He fled the scene, leaving his girlfriend behind. Upon seeing that blood had started pooling around Dewan, the man was taken to Beth Israel Hospital, where he was subsequently pronounced as being in stable condition. Reddish was charged with misdemeanor assault and released without bail following an arraignment at Manhattan Criminal Court. Prior to uttering the racist remark that got him knocked out, Dewan had exhibited erratic behavior at other establishments. After drinking over $40 worth of beer at Village Den on West 12th Street, he went to a gym and reportedly tried to sit on women's laps. Dewan then encountered a woman smoking a cigarette outside Johnny's bar on Greenwich Avenue and cried about his wife leaving him and his job at Goldman Sachs, where it was determined that he didn't actually work. By the time that he ran into Reddish's table, he reportedly could hardly walk. Number 2. Incident at Popeyes. In the fall of 2019, a clip went viral on social media showing a white patron at a Popeyes restaurant yelling a racist tirade at a black customer. It was unclear what had triggered the aggressive reaction, but aside from repeatedly uttering the N-word and fighting threats, the man also balled his fist and lunged at the victim before ultimately choosing to leave the restaurant with his chicken order. The clip's online popularity, however, mainly stemmed from the incident's aftermath. The video cut to the racist white man getting beaten outside as a crowd cheered on his attacker. An unidentified man berated him for saying the N-word, shouting, "You in my hood," as he pushed him around on the sidewalk. He then forced the man to apologize. The viral video's caption indicated that after the beatdown, the man also had his spicy chicken sandwich stolen. The restaurant chain had recently announced the return of the coveted sandwich. causing a national stir and widespread shortages. In LA, a woman damaged her car trying to get in front at the drive-thru, and in Maryland, a man by the name of Kevin Terrell was fatally stabbed for cutting in line to get the sandwich. Number 1. Tamara Harrion. Greg Conn, a customer at the convenience store of a Shell super pumper in North Phoenix, Arizona, captured a video of an altercation between two female customers and posted it to Facebook in June of 2020. 61-year-old Tamara Harrion had stormed into the store demanding assistance, saying that the line outside was getting long and that her gas pump wasn't working. Harrion claimed she was the establishment's manager, which was untrue. Karina Rodriguez was at the register and told Harrion that she didn't need her assistance. In the moments that followed, a verbal back and forth ensued, during which Harrion told Rodriguez, who was identified in the media as a Native American woman, to go back to her country. Rodriguez, who was born in the US, pointed out that Native Americans are from this country and insulted Harrion for her racist remarks. As Conn continued recording, Harrion approached him as well, saying he wasn't a part of the confrontation and told him, "You will leave too," before returning to Rodriguez. She then yelled at the latter, "You're going back to Mexico." Rodriguez tried to walk away but was grabbed by Harrion, to which she reacted by slapping the woman across the face. Stunned, Harrion then repeatedly exclaimed, "Oh my God!" as she walked towards the exit while rearranging her sunglasses. In the slap's immediate aftermath, Conn stated that he thought Harrion had it coming for touching Rodriguez. After the video was posted, Harrion became known as the Arizona Karen in the media. Bob, her husband, publicly apologized to Rodriguez and claimed that his wife's behavior stemmed from her mental health issues. Bob, who worked as a lawyer, noted that his wife had started making up stories and exhibiting signs of paranoia following a break-in at their home which had occurred the previous year. The man added, "You can't get her help because she doesn't think there's anything wrong with her." In the fall of 2013, New York law enforcement released footage showing Mayor of Monticello Gordon Jenkins having a power-tripping meltdown following his arrest for DWI. After being taken into custody, he verbally abused the officers at the station, telling one of them, "I'm the one that hired you in this job, man." The police tried to professionally address Jenkins as sir and then mayor, but Jenkins sternly refused both in the obscenity-laced tirade. He flippantly asked to be called the N-word, adding, "Because that's what I am when I'm right here in handcuffs." He then threatened to come back at the officers if they pursued charges against him. During his outburst, Jenkins also ripped a clock off the wall and threw it out the door. The incident marked his third arrest during 5 years as mayor. He'd previously pleaded guilty to charges of selling fake goods. In 2011 and in 2012, he was arrested for punching a police officer. In November of 2014, he pleaded guilty to the DWI charge, and in January of 2015, he was sentenced to 45 days in jail for assaulting the officer. In the spring of 2015, the state Supreme Court ruled to remove him from office. Number 8. Bob and Nadine Menendez. U.S. Senator Bob Menendez and his wife Nadine were indicted by a federal grand jury in September of 2023 on multiple criminal charges. The couple faced 3 charges, each of conspiracy to commit bribery, conspiracy to commit honest services fraud, and conspiracy to commit extortion under color of official right. 3 businessmen, Wael Hannah, Jose Uribe, and Fred Davies, were named in the indictment. The senator and his wife were accused of using the former's power and influence to protect, and the senator and his wife were accused of using the former's power and influence to protect and enrich the businessmen and benefit the government of Egypt. Davies, who reportedly had ties to the Genovese crime family, was alleged to have provided the couple with gold bars and considerable sums of cash. In exchange, Menendez promised to pressure President Joe Biden to nominate a U.S. attorney for the District of New Jersey that could be influenced regarding the prosecution of Davies. As chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, Menendez also used his influence to benefit Hannah, whom Nadine had known prior to marrying him. 40-year-old Hannah, originally from Egypt, operated ISEG Halal in New Jersey. The company had recently been named the sole entity in charge of authorizing that any food product imported into Egypt had been prepared according to Islamic law. Menendez reportedly improperly advised and pressured an official at the United States Department of Agriculture to protect Hannah's monopoly. Communication with the latter was facilitated through Nadine, who was promised money by Hannah in the form of a no-show job at his company. Around the same time, Menendez disclosed sensitive information from Senate briefings to his wife, who forwarded it to an Egyptian official. Menendez told her in a text, "I'm going to sign off this sale to Egypt today. Egypt, 46,120 target practice rounds and 10,000 rounds, tank ammunition, $99 million. Businessman Jose Uribe bought the couple a Mercedes-Benz C300 convertible worth more than $60,000 in exchange for the senator intervening in the New Jersey state criminal prosecution of an associate of his. After Nadine took possession of the luxury vehicle, she received a text from Uribe asking if she was happy, to which she responded, "I will never forget this." When the authorities raided the couple's home in June of 2022, they found traces of the bribes, including 2 1-kilogram gold bars, 11 1-ounce gold bars, and over $480,000 in cash, the bulk of which was stuffed into envelopes and hidden in clothing, closets, and a safe. The couple maintained they were innocent and discriminated against, and the case was ongoing as of the latest updates. Number 7. James Hooker. While teaching at Enoch's High School in Modesto, California, in the early 2010s, James Hooker became involved in a relationship with his student, Jordan Powers. It came to light after the latter's mother, Tammy, had reported them to the police. The tryst made national headlines in 2012 when Hooker quit his job and left his wife and 3 daughters to move in with Powers, a high school senior who was 18 years old at the time. The couple gave several media interviews in the aftermath, declaring that what they had was true love. They also wanted to alleviate suspicions that inappropriate contact had occurred between them prior to Powers turning 18, even though they'd known each other since she was 14. The couple went on Dr. Phil, where Tammy accused Hooker of brainwashing her daughter. Her statement would fall in line with the general public view that the former teacher had abused his power to seduce the teenager. In the midst of the media frenzy, Power was contacted by a woman named Michelle Miller, who claimed that Hooker had taken advantage of her in 1998. They'd met while he was a business teacher at Davis High School in Modesto, and Miller, who wasn't of the legal age of consent, was a senior at Bayer High. Miller would report that she'd met Hooker at a Future Business Leader of America conference and that he took advantage of her while she was struggling with depression. The police had already been investigating Hooker's relationship with Powers when Miller's accusations surfaced. In April of 2012, Hooker was arrested on one charge of oral copulation with a minor for the incident, which dated back 14 years. At the time, Powers broke with him, telling the media, "I lost everything for this guy. I lost my senior year and I gave up all my friends at high school because they didn't agree with it." Subsequent reports, however, indicated that they'd resumed the relationship, much to the despair of Powers' mother. Miller pleaded no contest to his charge in the summer of 2013. He was required to register as an offender in order to serve 4 years of probation. Number 6. Ivan Estrada. In November of 2023, the mayor of a city in the central Mexican state of San Luis Potosí was taken into custody for allegedly abusing his power while in office. An investigation indicated that Ivan Estrada had diverted $345,485 from the Matehuala City Council payroll towards his own benefit. He was also accused of hiring people in no-show jobs and suspected of working with the cartels. A recording of a man whom the authorities later confirmed as Estrada was leaked by a journalist in May of 2023. In it, the mayor spoke to an unidentified person and boasted about his cartel ties. "I am transparent and I work with the cartel transparently," he was heard saying, before adding, "Whatever the cartel tells me, here it is, and whatever the cartel deserves, here it is." It wasn't clear to which cartel he was referring, but the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, Familia Michoacana, Gulf Cartel, and Zetas were known to operate in several cities across San Luis Potosi. Following his arrest, Estrada vehemently denied the allegations and instead accused San Luis Potosi Federal Deputy Alejandro Segovia of being involved with organized crime. Number 5. Jorge Athanasia. In November of 2023, the leadership of the All Saints Greek Orthodox Church off West McMurray Road in Canonsburg, Pennsylvania, met with local police to report that bank checks were missing and had been deposited into an unauthorized PNC account. An investigation was launched which discovered that Father Jorge Athanasia, aged 38, was the only person within the church who had a PNC ATM card. A search of his apartment produced the card, along with further evidence indicating that Athanasia had embezzled more than $117,000 from the church's bank account. Upon being questioned by law enforcement, the priest admitted to stealing the money due to personal hardships. He revealed his MO, which consisted of signing church checks and depositing them into his own account before transferring the money to a different account and withdrawing cash from it using an ATM. Athanasia admitted that he hadn't been authorized to handle the funds and had thus abused his position of power within the church. He was charged on 223 felony counts of theft by unlawful taking, forgery, bad checks, and access device usage. Updates from December of 2023 indicated that the priest had stolen from his church to fuel his gambling addiction. Number 4. John Kovac. On April the 18th of 2018, John Kovac, a police officer from Lorain, Ohio, pulled over his daughter's boyfriend, 18-year-old Mackay Coleman, without just cause. Several other youths were in the vehicle at the time, including Kovac's 18-year-old daughter, Caitlin. The officer led Coleman to the back of his cruiser. The incident was captured by the police vehicle's cameras, and when the young man asked why he was going to jail, Kovac told him, "We'll make it up as we go." Kovac then spoke with Gloria Morales, who emerged from her home nearby. Two of Morales' children were also in Coleman's car, and Kovac asked to search the woman's house, claiming his daughter's laptop was inside. Morales initially agreed, but then changed her mind and told Kovac to get a warrant when he threatened to give her daughter a $300 fine for not wearing her seatbelt. Up to that point, Kovac hadn't realized that his daughter was also in the back seat of Coleman's vehicle. When he saw her, the man released Coleman and dragged Caitlin to the back of his cruiser as she was frantically screaming and crying, telling him that he couldn't arrest her without a reason. When Coleman asked why she was being detained, Kovac told him that he was concerned for his daughter's well-being before he drove off with her in the car. As reported by the Chronicle Telegram, an internal investigation revealed that the officer's ex-wife had told him a few days prior that she'd found both Coleman and Caitlin, both of whom were 18, having relations in her home. She asked the former to leave and he allegedly threatened her. Caitlin then called her father and said, "If I can't be with him, I don't want to be here anymore." He interpreted Caitlin's words as her threatening to self-harm, which ultimately prompted him to take her into custody. Kovac told investigators that he and his ex were against their daughter's relationship, adding that he didn't think Coleman was a good person, as he'd been arrested for marijuana possession. Following the internal investigation, Kovac was fired on May the 11th. He'd not only detained the teens without valid cause, but also tracked Caitlin down using police computers and ignored an emergency call to a nearby crash during the incident. Number 3. Miguel Hernandez. In the spring of 2022, footage started circulating online of a Miami cop brutally assaulting a handcuffed suspect. Bodycam videos of the incident, which had taken place on November the 27th of 2020, had only recently been disclosed to the public as the arrest was being investigated by the Miami Civilian Investigative Panel. On the aforementioned date, the police had been called to remove 20-year-old Julissa Burgos, who was sitting on the sidewalk outside a gas station. Before Burgos walked away, she put her cigarette out on the rear side door of Officer Miguel Hernandez's cruiser, leaving an ash stain. Burgos sat on the sidewalk. In the moments that followed, but Hernandez ordered her to go to the police vehicle and clean up the stain. Burgos resisted, and the video then showed Hernandez and his partner forcing the woman on the ground, twisting her arms back and handcuffing her. She started crying, told the cops that she was pregnant, and screamed at them not to touch her. She was eventually placed in the back of the cruiser, where she continued behaving belligerently. As tensions escalated, Burgos spat at Hernandez. Immediately, the officer punched her in the face. As shown in the body cam footage, he then grabbed the handcuffed woman by the throat, yanked her out of the car, and slammed her face first into the pavement. Burgos was unconscious for roughly 15 minutes. Several men in the area shouted at Hernandez saying, "You didn't have to do that," and "That's a female, bro." Even Hernandez's partner was seen staring at him in shock, yelling, "What the hell did you do?" Paramedics were called to the scene, and photos taken in the aftermath showed Burgos with massive swelling on the side of her face. She was charged with assault on a police officer and criminal mischief, but the charges were eventually dropped. An internal investigation was launched, and months after the incident in June of 2021, Hernandez resigned from the force and was thus reportedly allowed to keep his pension. Updates on the matter from 2022 indicated that he'd faced no charges for the incident, which was described by the civilian investigative panel as shocking and disgusting. Number 2. Grace Rose Baez. An NYPD officer was arrested in October of 2023 after she tried to sell drugs to a federal informant. On October the 17th, Officer Grace Rose Baez, aged 37, gave the informant a sample of what she described as top-quality fentanyl in a Mentos container. During the negotiations, the Bronx-based cop revealed that she could sell the informant a kilo of heroin for $25,000 and 800 grams of fentanyl, with pricing to be subsequently determined depending on the drug's purity. Federal agents reported that while working desk duty at an NYPD facility, Baez had multiple meetings with the informant and discussed selling kilogram quantities of narcotics. The corrupt cop met them again on October the 19th in Yonkers and handed over packages containing suspected narcotics, including a kilogram and 400 grams of heroin and 640 grams of fentanyl, labeled 640 manzana. Baez was arrested later that day. Afterwards, the police raided the home she shared with her boyfriend, 42-year-old Cesar Martinez. Cops found additional narcotics that the latter was trying to throw out, along with a kilogram press machine. Martinez was arrested without incident. Baez, who in a 2020 Instagram post had stated, "I will never apologize for picking a career I love to do," quit the force in the aftermath. Updates indicated that she was under house arrest with an ankle monitor pending the findings of an investigation. Police Commissioner Edward Caban publicly stated that if found guilty, Baez tarnished the shield that she wore. She and Martinez both faced the possibility of lengthy prison sentences. Prior to the incident, Baez, who'd been a cop since 2012, had been placed on modified duty since 2020 after being accused of misconduct. While the circumstances of the latter allegation remained unclear, Baez also had a history of using excessive force. One incident, dating back to January of 2014, had resulted in 27-year-old Sean Young suffering a fractured foot. A civil rights case ensued that was settled in Manhattan federal court for $30,000. Number 1. Sergio Alvarez. While working the graveyard shift as a police officer in West Sacramento, California, Sergio Alvarez forced himself on multiple women in 2011 and 2012. His victims were down and outers, as lead Yolo County prosecutor Garrett Hamilton would later describe them. They were escorts or drug addicts, whom Alvarez felt no one would believe if they ever came forward. Towards perpetrating the assaults, he either used leverage, such as pending warrants and drug charges, or simply told the women he was going to arrest them and detained them until they submitted. The man, who was in his mid-30s and married at the time, carried out some of the attacks while in his patrol vehicle and on duty. After one woman came forward with the allegations, Alvarez was suspended. An internal investigation was launched, in the aftermath of which the disgraced cop was fired and arrested. During the trial that ensued, one of the victims, identified as Terry G., testified that she was accosted by Alvarez in late August of 2012. She was walking to a friend's house in the early hours of the morning when Alvarez detained her, saying he had a warrant against her. He then made Terry perform oral copulation in a dark, abandoned alley. Another victim, Anna B., a heroin user and self-professed escort, reported that she was forced to have relations with the cop against her wishes multiple times since September of 2012. Kayla R., Karen N., and Rochelle G. gave similar accounts of being abused by Alvarez under the threat of arrest or while being intimidated by his position of authority. In 2014, the cop was found guilty on multiple counts of kidnapping, abuse, and forced oral copulation, for which he was sentenced to 205 years to life in prison. 6 of his victims subsequently launched a civil suit against the city of West Sacramento and were ultimately awarded a combined settlement of $4.1 million. 32-year-old Kiara Nichelle Thomas, who was accused of punching an umpire at her daughter's softball game, was wearing a Mother of the Year shirt in her mugshot. On the night of April the 9th of 2022, Thomas was hurling foul language across the field during the 12 and under girls game in Laurel, Mississippi. Apparently, she then challenged a call of 47-year-old umpire Christy Moore at second base. She went on to threaten Moore several times during the remainder of the game. Moore eventually asked Thomas to leave instead of going home. The mother waited until the game was finished before confronting the umpire and punching her. Moments after the attack, Thomas absconded, but a Parks and Recreation employee took a picture of her license plate and vehicle. She was later pulled over shortly after 7 p.m. and arrested for misdemeanor simple assault. Additionally, she was banned from all recreational facilities in Laurel. Number 10. Jorge Aon Gonzalez. "I'm being arrested for defending my kid," said 41-year-old Jorge Aon Gonzalez when he was taken into custody after punching an umpire at a high school baseball game in Kissimmee, Florida. The game was taking place at Liberty High School on April the 18th of 2023. Earlier in the game, Gonzalez's son was issued an unsportsmanlike conduct warning by umpire Reynaldo Mora. The boy began to mouth off at the 63-year-old. Mora then told the youth to compose himself. As soon as the game ended, Mora was standing by the backstop when Gonzalez approached him from behind. Mora was sucker punched from behind and knocked out by Gonzalez, who left the area immediately after. The Osceola County Sheriff pointed out that Mora wasn't facing his attacker when he was struck, calling Gonzalez a coward. A warrant for Gonzalez's arrest was issued, charging him with battery on a sports official and disruption of a school function. 2 weeks later, the man was arrested and booked into the county jail on a $1,500 bond. Records indicated that this wasn't Gonzalez's first time causing disruption at a game. Number 9. Mindy Hernandez. On the morning of October the 13th of 2012, Mindy Hernandez from Louisville, Kentucky, was taken away in handcuffs after her son's football game at Valley High School. As the game was coming to an end, security guard Roger Barth, who was an off-duty Metro Corrections officer, told the crowd to clear the track for the homecoming parade. The officer reported he felt that the parents weren't moving fast enough. He subsequently approached Hernandez, telling her to get off the track or he was going to have to exit her off. The 33-year-old mother responded with a curse word directed at him. During the course of Barth's attempt to then restrain Hernandez with handcuffs, she was slammed into the track on her face, according to a witness. Eventually, Louisville Metro police officers arrived and took Hernandez into custody. She was booked into Metro Corrections on charges of disorderly conduct and resisting arrest. 4 days later, Hernandez appeared in the district court where she pleaded not guilty, claiming that Barth had used excessive force during the arrest. It was unclear what punishment she received in the end or if Barth was facing any disciplinary actions. Number 8. Pedro Alberto Hernandez Garcia. A confrontation between a 47-year-old Texas man and a teen devolved into violence at a San Antonio Summer League basketball game in mid-2021. Pedro Alberto Hernandez Garcia was watching his son's game at Edison High School, where he was sitting next to teen Nathan Aguilar, who just finished his game and was cheering for the opposing team. Garcia and Aguilar taunted one another. The situation escalated into a physical confrontation when Garcia, according to Aguilar, put his whole body weight on him, all the while taking his cell phone and shoving it in Aguilar's face. Aguilar then smacked the phone out of Garcia's hand. The man responded by throwing several punches, hitting the teen's head. When Aguilar's coach, Mike Moreno, intervened, he was brought down to the ground and punched several times by Garcia. In the aftermath, Moreno was left with a black eye, while Aguilar suffered a concussion. Garcia claimed to responding law enforcement that he was defending himself and that he was unaware Aguilar was a juvenile student. Investigators learned through the gym surveillance footage that Aguilar's version of events had been an honest one and that Garcia indeed had been the instigator. The man was then arrested and charged with 2 counts of Class A misdemeanor assault causing bodily injury. Number 7. Andrew Ronald Bunnett. During a baseball game held at West Park in Roy, Utah, in June of 2019, Andrew Ronald Bunnett allegedly threatened his children's coach with a baseball bat. The 37-year-old apparently approached the coach and began arguing. According to several witnesses, Bunnett brandished a baseball bat, appearing to attempt to hit the coach. Parents in the crowd stepped in, preventing the situation from escalating further. Bunnett was later arrested for aggravated assault. He told the police that he started the argument because his children didn't get enough play time on the field during the game. Court documents indicated that Bunnett admitted to grabbing the baseball bat. However, he claimed that he didn't intend to pull it out in a threatening manner. Number 6. Grown-ups at children's baseball game in Colorado. A large brawl broke out among parents at a Little League game in Lakewood, Colorado on June the 15th of 2019. The incident unfolded at Westgate Elementary shortly before noon when a 13-year-old umpire ruled that one of the players batted out of order. Someone in the stands reported he complained. Parents then took over the field and began assaulting each other while the young players got out of the way and avoided injuries. Men and women were punching and pushing each other. The chaos ended with several people being seriously hurt, according to the Lakewood police spokesman. In the aftermath, citations were issued to 6 men for disorderly conduct and fighting in public. The executive board of the local sports association released a statement saying coaches and parents who participated in the incident were being removed indefinitely. Number 5. Michael Russell. Jacksonville Sheriff's Office homicide detective was accused of hitting a referee at a children's soccer game on March the 25th of 2023 in Florida. The 46-year-old, who was off duty, attended the game held at Losco Regional Park in the Mandarin neighborhood. During the game, a fight broke out among the players, causing several parents to come onto the field. Referees consequently tried to break up the fight, blowing their whistles. Russell approached one of the referees and told him to stop. He then struck the referee, knocking the whistle out of his mouth. The victim was able to identify Russell through a team manager. When the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office was notified of the potential criminal allegation, the agency began investigating immediately. A day after the incident, an officer obtained a photo and cell phone video of the attack, which contradicted the statement Russell had provided on March the 27th, in which he had claimed his innocence. Russell was eventually arrested and charged with third-degree felony battery on a sports official. According to the sheriff, an administrative review will follow after the conclusion of Russell's criminal case. As of the latest updates, the man was no longer with the homicide unit, but was still employed with the sheriff's office. Number 4. Jordan Lee Grinnell. 38-year-old Navy Chief Jordan Lee Grinnell, who was stationed at Richmond, Virginia, was arrested after allegedly pummeling a teen boy who had pushed his son. The ordeal occurred during the North American Sand Soccer Championship, which was held in Virginia Beach on June of 2018. Near the end of the game, Grinnell's son and the teen boy started pushing each other as they fought for possession of the ball. Out of nowhere, Grinnell suddenly charged the field, knocking the other player to the ground, striking him at least twice. According to a witness, a coach intervened by tackling the man. Others then joined in, pulling Grinnell away. The victim was hospitalized after suffering a concussion and a bloody lip. Grinnell, who'd received 5 good conduct medals in the Navy, was arrested by Virginia Beach police. He pleaded no contest on October the 4th of the same year and was found guilty of assault and battery. Grinnell was sentenced to 12 months in jail with 10 months suspended, to be followed by 2 years of probation. He'd be allowed to serve out his 60 days of incarceration over the course of 30 consecutive weekends. Number 3. Adam Soucy. Woonsocket police were called to Renault Field for a reported fight on May the 3rd of 2023. When officers arrived, 3 people claimed that they'd been attacked by a Rhode Island man named Adam Soucy, who'd already left the scene. An officer observed that one of the victims had swelling and redness in her left eye. Police determined that the victims were the coaching staff for the Woonsocket Boys youth baseball team. According to the staff, Soucy's son had been benched by the umpire and coaches for acting out. They added that Soucy began yelling obscenities at the umpire and coaching staff. Soucy subsequently threw punches, hitting someone in the left eye. At that point, the coaches and other parents intervened and Soucy fled the scene. Soucy was later arrested and charged with 3 counts of simple assault and/or battery, as well as 1 count of disorderly conduct. Number 2. Dominique Graham. After being attacked on the morning of February the 19th of 2022, referee Greg Ivanovsky claimed to have seen the worst behavior he'd ever seen from a parent. Ivanovsky, who at that point had been refereeing for more than 2 decades, was working a 7th grade girls basketball game at Plano Sports Authority in Murphy, Texas. During the game, one of the girls was thrown out after punching another player during a jump ball. Once the game ended, the girl who'd been ejected came back onto the court to start a fight with a player from the other team, yelling profanities. The mother of the girl then stepped onto the court and punched the teen girl her daughter was yelling at. Ivanovsky tried to stop the mother but was sucker punched by her and knocked backwards. The woman proceeded to yell at other parents when the father stepped in to protect his family. The woman consequently scratched the man across his face, leaving him visible red marks. She then assaulted 2 more team players, causing more parents and kids to intervene. Law enforcement arrived at the scene and arrested the woman identified as Dominique Graham. The 37-year-old was facing 3 felony counts of injury to a child and 2 other counts of assault.
How do you do that to a child? I mean, honestly, I'm getting a little emotional because I'm baffled by that.
Number 1. Rochelle Ray Zeller. A Pennsylvania woman was accused of punching another woman and endangering a man at a youth football game on November the 20th of 2021. Local police were called to the Joe Larrick football field on Kyler's Road in Sugarloaf Township at around 7 p.m. about reports of a large fight in progress. When officers arrived, many adults were on the field, but no one was actually fighting anymore. Witnesses told police that a woman named Rachel had assaulted Danya Shal, punching her in the face and causing her to fall to the ground. Rachel then entered a Mercedes-Benz and drove onto the field, striking Gary Chapin before fleeing the scene. Police later discovered a vehicle matching the description parked behind a residence on Mayock Street. It had football equipment inside, scuff marks on the body, and mud on its tires and wheel wells. Zeller was tracked down in the vicinity of the vehicle and apprehended. When questioned by police, she confirmed that she was at her son's football game that night, but declined to answer further questions. According to the police, she had blood stains on her pants and blood on her right hand. She was charged with aggravated assault, disorderly conduct, reckless endangerment, and 2 counts each of simple assault and harassment. In lieu of a $25,000 cash bond, she was booked into the Luzerne County Correctional Facility. During Zeller's trial, her attorney said that at the time of the incident, Zeller was gathering her son and daughter to leave the field when she noticed Shal aggressively approaching her daughter. Zeller eventually admitted to punching Shal because she believed that her daughter was going to be assaulted. The court also heard that Zeller had to drive around the grandstand and onto the field because she hadn't been able to back out due to the amount of people around her, accidentally striking Chapin in the process. In March of 2023, Zeller was acquitted on 2 counts of aggravated assault charges and convicted on charges of simple assault, reckless endangerment, and disorderly conduct and harassment. She was handed a 6 to 23-month prison sentence.
No, I will tell I will tell the governor how you treat me.
Okay, and you're welcome to do that.
Yeah, go ahead and check my background. I am part of that task force. And you're gonna let my husband treat me like this?
Because he has your ID.
On February the 8th of 2022, the police in Albuquerque, New Mexico were dispatched to the scene of a multi-car accident at the intersection of Lomas and Tramway. Immediately upon arrival, officers encountered a woman by the name of Michelle Curtis, who appeared agitated and unstable on her feet. She was asked to take a seat on the ground, at which point she began sobbing uncontrollably. As officers conducted their preliminary investigation, it started to become clear that Curtis, a political task force member appointed by Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham, was responsible for the crash, which had left much of the roadway blocked in its wake. It was later determined that she'd also been involved in a hit and run at a nearby McDonald's. Curtis repeatedly stated that she was on her way to pick up her kids from school. When asked if she'd been drinking, she admitted to consuming a little bottle of tequila, but refused to cooperate with law enforcement, even going so far as to use her perceived influence to threaten the officers' jobs. Despite Curtis's insistence that she knew the governor and could get the officers in trouble for arresting her, they ultimately did just that. The woman was charged with aggravated DWI, for which she was later given 1 year of supervised probation after agreeing to plead guilty. As part of the deal, Curtis was allowed to keep her position on the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Relatives Task Force. Number 6. Rebecca L. Doherty.
Kidding me?
Am I kidding about what?
I am absolutely out of my mind with...
You're intoxicated.
I am so intoxicated, but...
In February of 2019, Ohio Judge Rebecca L. Doherty veered off the highway while driving in a snowstorm and consequently crashed into a ditch. Local police dispatched an officer to the scene who observed vomit inside Doherty's vehicle and also detected the smell of alcohol on her breath. The woman, who reportedly served on the Portage County Common Pleas Court, indicated that she'd been drinking that night. Her impairment was further displayed as she attempted to climb from the steep embankment into which she'd crashed. Doherty was unsteady and nearly fell over before finally emerging from the ditch. She noted that she was a sitting jurist several times, but was nevertheless taken to the local police station for processing. The judge partially completed a sobriety test and refused a breathalyzer, asking for the deputies to instead take her home. When they declined to let her go, Doherty repeatedly asked if she could call a friend, who was a local sheriff's deputy, to sort things out, but her requests were once again rejected. She was charged with a first-degree misdemeanor count of operating a vehicle while impaired, to which she later pleaded guilty. Doherty was given a jail sentence of 180 days, 177 of which was suspended, had her driver's license suspended for a year, and was ordered to pay a fine of just over $1,000. The court decreed that $700 of the fine would be suspended so long as Doherty refrained from adding any other drug or alcohol-related convictions to her record for 2 years, and completed a driver intervention program. 2 months after the incident, the Office of Disciplinary Counsel filed a complaint against Judge Doherty with the Board of Professional Conduct. The complaint alleged that her conduct violated the rules requiring a judge to act at all times in a manner that promotes public confidence in the independence, integrity, and impartiality of the judiciary, and prohibiting a judge from abusing the prestige of judicial office. Doherty was thus issued a public reprimand for her actions. Number 5. Mary O'Connor. Back in 1995, a rookie cop from the Tampa Police Department in Florida was with her boyfriend when they were pulled over by a Hillsborough County Sheriff's deputy during the early morning hours. As the deputy tried administering a sobriety test to the boyfriend, the rookie officer, who back then was known as Mary Minter, became uncooperative. She allegedly tried interfering with the field test and was asked to sit in the squad car until the traffic stop was completed, at which point she began acting belligerently, kicking the vehicle's windows and even punching the deputy in the shoulder and chest. In the aftermath, Mary, who later married her boyfriend Keith and took his last name, O'Connor, was slapped with several criminal charges and initially kicked off the force. However, she was subsequently reinstated and over the course of the next 3 decades rose the ranks of the department until eventually being appointed Tampa's police chief. In 2022, the woman found herself at the center of yet another scandal in relation to a traffic stop conducted on the evening of November the 12th. She and Keith were traveling along a public road in Pinellas County in a golf cart when they were pulled over by Officer Larry Jacoby. In spite of the fact that Keith, who was driving, was unable to produce a valid license, Jacoby ultimately let the couple off without issuing any citations. As shown in viral body cam footage of the incident, Mary identified herself as the Tampa police chief before saying, "I'm hoping that you'll just let us go tonight." Jacoby indicated that he recognized the woman, then sent them off into the night with a handshake. Before driving away, Mary gave the young officer her card and told him to call her if he ever needed anything. Local media outlets fought to have the body cam footage released to the public, and after weeks of denying the video's very existence, the Tampa Police Department finally delivered it in early December. In the wake of the video's publication, Mary apologized for her actions, stating she'd used poor judgment by noting her high-ranking position to Officer Jacoby. After an internal investigation was subsequently launched, Mary resigned as chief per Tampa Mayor Jane Castor's request. Number 4. Karen Z. Turner. In 2018, controversy surrounded a commissioner for the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey following the publication of traffic stop footage involving the public official's daughter and her friends. According to subsequent reports, Tenafly resident Karen Z. Turner, who served as chair of the Port Authority's Governance and Ethics Committee, received a phone call from her daughter on March the 31st. The young woman had been driving with friends when Tenafly police pulled her over for having expired plates. When officers discovered that Turner's daughter didn't have a valid insurance card either, they moved to impound the vehicle. Turner arrived at the scene a short time later and began arguing with law enforcement, repeatedly demanding to know the reason for the stop while sounding off about her close relationship with the city's mayor. The woman proceeded to threaten the police, indicating they wouldn't be able to charge her daughter because of her purported political influence, all while insisting that the officers address her as Commissioner. The contentious interaction culminated in Turner ordering one of the policemen to shut up, though her actual taunt included profanity as well. The woman, whose brazen display of entitlement and insubordination earned her the nickname Tenafly Karen, faced widespread backlash in the incident's wake. Her actions were reported on by national media outlets including CBS News, CNBC, and the New York Times. A week later, she resigned from the Port Authority, and the agency's chair issued an apology to the officers involved in the traffic stop. Turner was given an official censure as well as a $1,500 fine as a consequence for her belligerence. Number 3. Vanessa L. Gibson. Vanessa L. Gibson, a member of the New York City Council, was pulled over by Officer Miguel Hernandez of the NYPD in March of 2014. The liberal lawmaker, who'd been elected to represent the city's 16th district only 2 months prior, was accused of using her cell phone while driving, which she denied. During the course of the traffic stop, Gibson contacted the police department's deputy chief, Kevin Catalina, and pleaded her case. She maintained that Officer Hernandez's assertion that she was using her phone behind the wheel was categorically false, although the councilwoman later said that she didn't explicitly ask Catalina to intervene on her behalf or interfere with the issuance of a traffic summons. That's exactly what ended up happening. The deputy chief got in contact with the precinct's desk officer, who in turn told Officer Hernandez not to write Gibson a ticket. Furthermore, the latter handed the phone to Hernandez while still on the line with Catalina, who then informed the officer of Gibson's position on city council, as though it exonerated her of her alleged offense. In 2016, Officer Hernandez sued the city for a reported $35 million, claiming that police officials had wrongly instructed her to rip up Gibson's citation. Although the suit was ultimately dismissed, the councilwoman did end up facing repercussions in connection with the incident. She reportedly reached a settlement with the Conflicts of Interest Board, stipulating that she needed to pay a $5,000 fine for pulling rank on Officer Hernandez. Number 2. Mary Beth Leach. During a ladies' night out on May the 12th of 2018, the wife of Hockey Hall of Famer Brian Leach got into a brawl with employees at a gay bar in Manhattan. According to prosecutors, 49-year-old Mary Beth Leach subsequently tried to pull rank on responding law enforcement, indicating she had friends on the force and even knew the commissioner personally. She also allegedly boasted about her marriage to Leach, who was a local legend because of the 17 seasons he'd played for the hometown New York Rangers. During the course of his 18-year career, Mary Beth claimed that the fight, which left one bartender with a bloody gash on his head and multiple others injured, had been triggered after she, her sister, and their friend were asked to leave the establishment because they were singing too loud. The two sisters were subsequently taken to the NYPD's 19th precinct, where they were booked on harassment and assault charges. Although Mary Beth and her sister maintained that they'd been the actual victims of the bar fight, they eventually pleaded guilty to disorderly conduct and were consequently ordered to attend 5 sessions of solo counseling. Number 1. Tyrone Booth. In early 2023, reports surfaced online regarding a lawsuit that had been brought against the Flint Police Department in Michigan. Mary Busek, a former Flint detective, allegedly began experiencing a campaign of harassment at the hands of a fellow cop, as well as her superiors. Officer Tyrone Booth reportedly made unwanted advances towards Busek sometime in late 2017, when he was accused of ordering her to perform intimate acts and thrusting his groin in her face. She rejected him, at which point the prolonged abuse commenced. Over the course of the next 2 years, Busek was repeatedly threatened with demotion and termination by Booth, who used his ties to the department's upper echelon to keep the woman's allegations against him from leaking to the press. Busek eventually did get demoted, then resigned from the force and filed litigation against the department in 2019. Details of the abuse she'd suffered didn't come to light until much more recently, after she was awarded a $175,000 payout in an internal settlement. Booth, it subsequently emerged, had since been promoted to a 6-figure job as police spokesman, which as of the latest updates he still retained. Flint City Councilman Eric Meyers was highly critical of the settlement, which he said would continue to cover up details that could have been humiliating for the department. A woman who chose not to be named was recorded screaming at Trader Joe's employees in North Hollywood, California, upon being asked to wear a mask. In June of 2020, cell phone footage from other customers would show the woman, identified as a Los Angeles resident, throwing her shopping basket and lashing out at the workers, at one point calling them Democratic pigs. She hurled insults at other shoppers who'd confronted her and also claimed that her doctor didn't allow her to wear a mask. She added that by harassing her into doing so, the others were in violation of federal law. She then angrily brushed off employees and left the store. When interviewed by a media outlet, she didn't elaborate on her medical condition but claimed that her tirade was sparked by a customer who'd begun to insult her for not complying with the statewide mandate. In July of 2021, Ijima Ukenta was visiting a Victoria's Secret store at a mall in Millburn, New Jersey. Ukenta, a woman of Nigerian descent, was trying to redeem a coupon for free panties when she got involved in an altercation with a white woman named Abigail Elphick. While they were near the cash register, the latter allegedly nudged Ukenta, who started recording her. As the encounter escalated, Elphick attempted to slap the phone out of Ukenta's hand and then suffered a breakdown in front of her. Upon realizing she was being filmed, she started crying and assumed a squatting position, begging not to be recorded. Ukenta told workers at the store to get security because the other woman had tried to charge her, while Elphick started screaming that she was being threatened before eventually lying motionless, face down on the floor, using her purse as a pillow. The first video ended with a store worker helping Ukenta with her purchase. As she told the white woman, "Bye Karen," a second clip would show Elphick convulsing on the floor while pointing at Ukenta, screaming that she was recording her. The former then chased her around the store to get her to stop filming, which Ukenta didn't desist from doing, arguing that the footage was for her protection in front of the authorities. Elphick ultimately called the police. She'd later admit to officers of having suffered a breakdown because she was afraid that if the video went viral, which it since has, she'd lose her job and apartment. Elphick, dubbed the Victoria's Secret Karen by the media, wasn't charged, while Ukenta started a GoFundMe to seek legal help in the matter. The page has since generated over $100,000. In June of 2020, amid the COVID-19 pandemic, Facebook user Alison Goodbaum uploaded a video of an unnamed maskless woman coughing on her at a New York City bagel shop. The confrontation began when Goodbalm pointed out to an employee that the woman was coughing without covering her mouth and not wearing a face mask, as mandated by law. The woman in question overheard the complaint and began berating Goodbalm, claiming that she had COVID antibodies and that other customers should mind their business. She then proceeded to cough on Goodbalm and call her names. The Facebook user's anger was also directed at the bagel shop itself, as workers didn't check on her well-being and continued to serve the coughing patron. The video went viral on various social media platforms and generated outrage online, with the woman in question subsequently dubbed Coughing Karen. She was identified as a former employee of Weill Cornell Medicine, but her identity wasn't definitely confirmed at the time, as she'd taken steps towards removing her online presence. In her post, Goodbalm argued that within the context of the pandemic, the other woman's behavior could be considered assault. In February of 2021, a couple sitting courtside at an LA Lakers-Atlanta Hawks game became embroiled in a verbal altercation with NBA superstar LeBron James. The couple, Juliana and Chris Carlos, and the basketball player reportedly traded insults. The dispute, according to 25-year-old Juliana, had started after James had cursed at her husband, a decade-long Hawks supporter. But other witnesses reported that the couple had been constantly heckling him. A video captured during the fourth quarter would show how Juliana then started screaming at James. As a result, both Juliana and Chris were escorted out of the stadium. In the aftermath, Juliana uploaded a profanity-laced video on Instagram which was directed at James, while the basketball player himself referred to her as Courtside Karen in a tweet, a nickname that stuck. The feud earned Juliana considerable media attention, and in its wake, she got a major boost to her Instagram follower account. However, she and Chris also became targets for online ridicule, with social media users commenting on everything from their appearance to the age difference between them. Juliana would subsequently apologize for her Instagram rant. Among the most infamous incidents to have been included in the Karen paradigm was a confrontation between Amy Cooper, a white woman walking her dog, and Christian Cooper, no relation, an African-American birdwatcher. It occurred in The Ramble, a western section of New York City Central Park, on the morning of May the 25th of 2020. Amy was in an area of the park that required owners to keep their dogs on a leash. Christian asked her to comply with the rules, which she refused, to which the man, by his own admission, replied, "Look, if you're going to do what you want, I'm going to do what I want, but you're not going to like it." He then proceeded to beckon her Cocker Spaniel with a dog treat. Christian began filming with his cell phone after Amy had screamed at him not to touch her dog. She approached him, pointed her finger in his face, and demanded he stop recording, while also telling him not to get close to her. She then proceeded to call 911, telling the operator to send the cops immediately because an African-American man was threatening her and her dog. The video ended with Amy leashing her dog and Christian thanking her for choosing to do so. Both of them had left by the time the police arrived at the scene. Christian's video went viral in the aftermath, amassing over 40 million views on Twitter alone. Amy's actions of falsely presenting herself to be in imminent danger were widely criticized. Her employers at Franklin Templeton, where she worked as head of insurance investment, fired her upon seeing the footage. The incident prompted a national conversation on how black and white Americans are seen and treated differently by the police, as well as on how many similar incidents that go undocumented result in the former being falsely accused. Amy was charged with filing a false police report, punishable with up to a year in jail, but the charges were dropped in February of 2021 after she completed a 5-session educational and therapeutic program on racial identity. According to her own updates on the matter, she'd received death threats and was doxxed to the point that she had to leave the country. In the incident's wake, legislation first proposed in 2018 took effect in New York, making it a hate crime for people to falsely report criminal incidents based on someone's race, gender, or religion. In early 2021, Maya Ponsetto, whom the media nicknamed Soho Karen, was charged with attempted robbery, endangering the welfare of a child, attempted grand larceny, and attempted assault. The charges stem from an incident in the lobby of the Arlo Soho Hotel in New York City, which had taken place in December of 2020. 22-year-old Ponsetto entered the hotel and falsely accused Keon Harold Jr., aged 14, of stealing her iPhone, even though both he and his father, renowned jazz trumpeter Keon Harold Sr., had denied the allegations. Ponsetto attempted to tackle the child. The incident was captured on cell phone footage, with the hotel's manager seemingly supporting the woman without apparent grounds. It turned out that Ponsetto had mistakenly left her phone in an Uber, and the driver later returned it to her. Harold Sr. would subsequently state that neither he nor his son was given a chance to be heard in the matter, and that they'd been guilty then proven innocent. On January the 7th, the police arrested Ponsetto at her home in Ventura County, California, and during an initial court hearing, she interrupted a judge by asking to avoid jail time. Harold filed a lawsuit against the young woman for a violent incident of racial profiling, and in July of 2021, a grand jury also charged Ponsetto with having committed a hate crime. She pleaded not guilty, and the trial is ongoing. In December of 2019, in the town of Mildura, Australia, a woman by the name of Karen Ridge was charged with willfully damaging an Aboriginal flag belonging to her neighbor. An argument erupted as 48-year-old Ridge and another neighbor, Robert Viggers, started questioning the Aboriginal heritage of Indigenous artist Robbie Wirramanda Knight, who'd raised the flag. Ridge was filmed by Knight trying to tear down the flag and failing, to which he replied, "It's too strong for you, Karen." The ensuing viral video would feature the hashtag too strong for you, Karen. In the footage, Viggers, aged 65, told Knight that he was making a mockery because he wasn't a true Aboriginal, and that him claiming to be one made him laugh. In the aftermath, Viggers, the franchisee of 2 McDonald's outlets, lost control of the businesses as the parent company deemed he should no longer be involved. The charges against him and Ridge were ultimately dropped. The weekend after the viral video incident, hundreds gathered at an anti-racism rally in Mildura. On April the 7th of 2021, a Texas school board candidate was kicked out of a Nordstrom rack in Austin after refusing to wear a face mask inside the store. It was reported that the unruly woman, later named as Cara Bell, had been asked multiple times by the store's employees to put on a face covering in accordance with Nordstrom's policies and the mandates in effect at the time. Bell repeatedly ignored the workers' requests, reportedly indicating that she was exempted from wearing a face mask because of a medical condition. The woman allegedly pushed an employee to the side aggressively in order to gain access to one of the store's dressing rooms, and the police were subsequently called to the scene. Bell then began shouting hysterically at members of law enforcement on the sidewalk outside the store, as was captured by the responding officers' body cams. The woman alleged that she'd been the one assaulted by one of the Nordstrom employees and suggested that she'd been targeted because of her race. Bell continued to argue with the officers and refused to identify herself several times. At one point, she attempted to walk away, but was informed that she was being detained and wasn't allowed to leave the area. Shortly after the woman's incensed tirade had begun to abate, the officers placed her in handcuffs. Bell was reportedly issued an assault citation, which is a Class C misdemeanor, punishable by a fine of up to $500. In the aftermath of the incident, the video of her arrest went viral on social media, leading to Bell being labeled a Karen on steroids. Texas woman Laura K. Lewis was taken into custody for harassing a group of teenagers at a skate park in Austin on August the 18th of 2020. As was captured on video by witnesses, the barefooted woman had initially approached the skaters and berated them for unknown reasons. At one point, she got close to one of the teens and aggressively shoved him. Another skater responded by dumping a jug of water on Lewis's head, causing the situation to escalate considerably. Lewis was shown attempting to take the water jug away from the teenager before kicking him with her bare feet repeatedly. A female bystander then stepped in and knocked the woman over a nearby ledge. Shortly thereafter, police officers arrived at the scene and, having witnessed part of the altercation themselves, took Lewis into custody. The social media dubbed Karen claimed that she'd actually been the one victimized by the teenagers, whom she alleged had stolen her purse. It was later reported that Lewis had been charged with assault by contact following her arrest. 2 Georgia women were arrested before a Gwinnett County School Board meeting that took place on November the 18th of 2021. The detainees were later identified as Snellville resident Karen Perkle and Brenda Stewart of Suwannee. The Gwinnett Daily Post reported that Perkle had been prohibited from entering Gwinnett County public school property following a confrontation over face masks at a previous board meeting in October. The aptly named Karen attempted to attend the meeting on November the 18th in defiance of the police order issued against her and was consequently charged with criminal trespass. Stewart was reportedly stopped by officers at the school after she'd set off a metal detector during a security screening. Her bag was subsequently searched, at which point a pair of scissors was discovered inside. Upon being told she wasn't allowed to bring the scissors into the meeting, Stewart attempted to snatch them out of the officer's grasp and a brief struggle ensued. She was later taken into custody and charged with obstruction of a police officer. A member of the United States Navy was assaulted by a middle-aged woman at a pizza shop in Berlin, Connecticut on September the 11th of 2021. According to a police report, the incident occurred shortly before 10 p.m. when Laurie Desjardins, age 45, accused a man in military fatigues of stolen valor. She reportedly asserted that the man's military ID was fake, then proceeded to take out her own dependent military ID and insisted that it was what a valid, officially issued identification card should look like. During the course of her outburst, the brunt of which was caught on video and widely shared on social media later on, Desjardins called the man disgusting. As she grew progressively angrier, she grabbed the hat off his head and tossed it to the ground. In one final attempt to get the serviceman to leave the establishment, Desjardins rushed towards him and slapped him in the left side of his face. A few days later, the woman reportedly turned herself into the police, whereupon she was charged with third-degree assault and second-degree breach of peace. The man, whom Desjardins had accused of wearing a fake Navy uniform, was later identified as Sean Nolte Jr., a volunteer firefighter who was also serving as a submarine electronics fire control technician for the U.S. Navy in Groton at the time of the incident. On November the 24th of 2021, Texas resident Rossi Dennis brandished a firearm during an argument in the parking lot of an H-E-B supermarket in Corpus Christi. According to local police, the 60-year-old woman had confronted another female shopper over a parking space to which she'd felt entitled. During the course of the heated interaction, which was captured on the victim's cell phone, Dennis was shown shouting into the driver's side window of the woman's vehicle in the presence of her 6-month-old child. In an effort to intimidate the other shopper into relinquishing the space, Dennis ultimately resorted to pulling out a handgun and threatening to shoot her. When Corpus Christi police officers arrived a short time later, the armed woman had already left, but eyewitnesses confirmed that she'd pointed a weapon in the victim's direction. Investigators used the driver's recording of the incident to positively identify Dennis as the perpetrator. She was reportedly taken into custody 4 days later and booked into the city detention center on a charge of aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. Her bond was set at $60,000. An Australian woman was nicknamed Bunnings Karen by internet users after she'd filmed herself admonishing staff members at a Bunnings warehouse store in the Melbourne suburb of Narwarren in July of 2020. As shown in the video, 42-year-old Kerry Nash accused the store's employees of violating her human rights after they'd politely requested that she put on a face mask. When Nash eventually left the store, she was met by members of local law enforcement who'd been notified of the situation. She resisted the officers' attempts to place her in handcuffs and was later released from custody after claiming that she had a medical exemption that precluded her from wearing a face covering. Nash later posted the video recording of her berating the Bunnings staff to social media, which led to her facing widespread criticism for her disorderly behavior. The woman, a former iSelect sales consultant, announced her intention of suing the police for how they treated her, although, as of the latest updates on the matter, it wasn't clear whether such legal action was ever taken. In December of 2021, a woman on board a Delta Airlines flight from Tampa Bay to Atlanta was recorded attacking a fellow passenger for not wearing a face mask. The viral video showed 51-year-old Patricia Cornwall standing in the aisle of the plane and unloading an expletive-laden tirade at a seated male passenger. As many who viewed the video in the aftermath were quick to point out, Cornwall's outburst was rather ironic given that her own mask was pulled down under her nose and mouth. As her verbal abuse continued, the woman also reportedly struck the other passenger in the head and spat on him, prompting crew members to restrain and escort her to the other end of the cabin. The flight landed at Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport at 6:10 p.m. The police were notified of the mid-air disturbance Cornwall had caused, and they subsequently detained the woman at the airport. She was then relocated to the domestic Atlanta police precinct, where she was taken into the custody of FBI agents. In the wake of the incident, it emerged that Cornwall, a former NFL cheerleader, had had other recent run-ins with the law. About a month prior to the episode, on the Delta flight, she'd reportedly crashed her car into a tree in Santa Rosa Beach, Florida, while she was intoxicated. Cornwall was consequently charged with a DUI, and she ultimately faced federal assault charges as well, in connection to the incident on the plane. On July the 1st of 2020, Takalia Hill and her daughter, Michaela Green, were involved in an alarming altercation with a woman outside a Chipotle in Orion Township, Michigan. As 15-year-old Green would later tell the Detroit News, she was walking into the restaurant at about 6 p.m. when the woman identified as Jillian Woostenberg bumped into her seemingly on purpose. Green reacted to Woostenberg's carelessness by saying, "Excuse you?" and asking for an apology, to which the middle-aged woman took particular exception. She began berating the teen for purportedly invading her personal space. Hill came over to defend her daughter, and the shouting match then escalated in intensity. Woostenberg's husband began yelling at the mother and daughter as well, and Hill reportedly accused the couple of being racist. The Woostenbergs eventually returned to their vehicle and tensions began to die down. However, they almost ran over Hill while backing out of their parking space, prompting her to slap the car's rear to get them to stop. It was at that point that Woostenberg jumped out of the vehicle and brandished a firearm, pointing it directly at Hill and Green while ordering them to keep their distance. She then got back in the car and the couple left the scene. The Oakland County Sheriff's Office quickly tracked down the Woostenbergs and took them into custody on charges of felonious assault. The initial interaction between Green and Woostenberg wasn't recorded. The ensuing altercation, including the moment the gun was pulled, was caught on video. The footage promptly went viral in the incident's aftermath, with many viewers commenting that Woostenberg was a quintessential example of the Karen stereotype. In the late evening hours of August the 16th of 2019, the police in Rehoboth Beach, Delaware, heard a woman screaming loudly in the area of 143 Rehoboth Avenue. Officers subsequently encountered 22-year-old Kylie Dippery, who was said to have been in hysterics because she'd gotten separated from her boyfriend. Law enforcement helped reunite the young woman with her boyfriend at a nearby hotel. Then a few minutes later, the police were called back to the hotel after Dippery had begun screeching yet again. It was subsequently reported that she simply would not stop screaming and began to disturb several other hotel guests, at which point the officers took her into custody. As Dippery was being led into a patrol car, she allegedly became combative, kicking an officer in the leg and continuing her incessant yelling. After finally being restrained, Dippery reportedly vomited in the police cruiser and urinated on the floor of the holding area at the Rehoboth Beach Police Department. The Pennsylvania resident was booked on charges of resisting arrest with force or violence, offensive touching of a law enforcement officer, disorderly conduct, and creating a physically offensive condition. She was held at the Sussex Correctional Institution on $3,200 secured bail. Florida woman Tina Kindred was tased and arrested by Ocala law enforcement after having thrown a tantrum in the nude at a pair of local restaurants on June the 4th of 2021. The 53-year-old was caught on video smashing glass bottles and breaking other merchandise while unclothed at both a Mojo Grill and Outback in the Marion County city. Employees and other diners at the eateries pleaded with Kindred to stop as she wreaked havoc, destroying seemingly everything she could get her hands on while screaming incoherently. An Ocala police officer was eventually called to the Outback, where he approached the woman and attempted to calm her down. Kindred instead proceeded to launch glass bottles at the officer, who shouted at her to get on the ground after one of them hit him in the arm. The woman refused to comply, however, at which point the policeman deployed his taser to subdue her. She was consequently taken into custody on charges of aggravated battery on law enforcement and felony criminal mischief. In the wake of the incident, it emerged that Kindred had been denied service at Mojo Grill before entering both restaurants in search of revenge. On the night of March the 10th of 2022, an elderly New Yorker was tragically killed as a result of an unprovoked attack in the city's Chelsea neighborhood. The victim, a beloved former voice coach named Barbara Meyer Gustern, had been left critically injured after a red-headed woman approached her on the sidewalk along West 28th Street and shoved her to the ground from behind. 87-year-old Gustern's skull violently collided with the concrete below, and she remained hospitalized for about 5 days before ultimately succumbing to her head wound. The NYPD used surveillance footage to identify Gustern's attacker as Lauren Pazienza, who was arrested on 2 counts of second-degree assault. Following the victim's death, Pazienza also reportedly faced a manslaughter charge. Investigators subsequently determined that on the night of the deadly incident, Pazienza had flown into a rage after she and her fiancé were asked to leave nearby Chelsea Park because it was after closing time. The woman was alleged to have been slightly intoxicated after having consumed a few glasses of wine to celebrate their upcoming wedding. Her drunken tantrum continued after she allegedly threw food at her partner and crossed the street, at which point she shoved Gustern, with whom she had no prior association. In the immediate aftermath, Pazienza reportedly deleted her social media accounts, hid her cell phone, and fled to her parents' Long Island home, but was eventually tracked down by the authorities and thrown in jail. She was released on a $500,000 bond, but later rearrested after being deemed a serious flight risk. The Manhattan District Attorney's Office extended multiple plea deal offers to Pazienza, all of which she turned down, ensuring her case would go to trial. The court proceedings were scheduled to begin in October of 2022. A young pregnant woman was arrested for throwing a violent tantrum at a McDonald's in Lakeland, Florida on May the 19th of 2022. According to the Polk County Sheriff's Office, the incident began at around 5:30 p.m. when 22-year-old Tianis Jones arrived at the restaurant to pick up an order she'd placed online earlier. She proceeded through the drive-through line but was reportedly told that there had been an error with her food. The employees asked her to wait at the third drive-through window while the mistake was being corrected, but Jones instead parked her vehicle and stormed inside to confront the workers face-to-face. Roughly a minute into the ensuing interaction, Jones allegedly became violent, striking a small plastic sign and several bottles in the direction of the employees. Shortly thereafter, one of the young woman's relatives entered the restaurant and attempted to calm her down. Her outburst continued for about 10 minutes and resulted in approximately $100 worth of damages. Jones eventually dialed 911 to report that the McDonald's had tried to cheat her out of her money, and officers were subsequently dispatched to the scene. Before their arrival, however, Jones's meltdown culminated with the young woman lifting up her shirt to expose her midriff to the workers before finally agreeing to leave. The following day, she was taken into police custody on charges of burglary with assault, criminal mischief, disorderly conduct, and misuse of 911. Staffers from the WUSA 9 news station in Washington, D.C. went to a house in the city's southeast region to cover a hostage situation that unfolded in the early hours of October the 30th of 2013. Reporter Bruce Johnson and his photographer Danielle Gill were speaking with nearby residents when a woman watching from the second-floor window of the house they were covering began yelling at them to leave. They refused to comply with her demands, at which point the unidentified woman became incensed and went down to the street to confront them. The news crew contended that they were under no obligation to leave as they were standing on a public street, but the woman continued to shout at them before spraying mace in their general direction. She then struck both Johnson and Gill with one punch and knocked over the latter's video camera. To avoid further violence, the news crew left the area. While speaking about the incident later on, Johnson indicated that he wasn't sure whether the woman had been involved in the reported hostage situation, but added it was clear she'd been under a lot of stress. As reported by multiple news outlets in April of 2017, California woman Anna Storelli was waiting in line at a restaurant in Santa Monica when she became enraged by a couple sitting nearby. Storelli's meltdown was captured in a 7-minute video, during which she was shown yelling at a man and woman for allegedly kissing in public. She proceeded to launch an expletive-laden tirade at the couple, claiming that their public display of affection was making her and others feel uncomfortable. The man involved in the interaction later clarified that he'd only kissed his girlfriend on the forehead in the moments leading up to Storelli's outburst. The latter reportedly accused the young woman of being an escort before demanding a refund from the restaurant and threatening to have the cashier fired for their perceived mistreatment of her. Upon the video's release on social media, Storelli was widely ridiculed for her behavior, with many considering her reaction to the couple's kiss to have been an extreme overreaction. Law enforcement in Minneapolis, Minnesota received reports of a mid-air meltdown by a pair of unruly airplane passengers on December the 28th of 2016. It was reported that roughly an hour after Delta Flight 2565 had taken off from the Minneapolis-St. Paul International Airport, Blake A. Fleissig and his girlfriend, Anna C. Kuzman, had gotten into an altercation with others on board the aircraft. It started after the latter had allegedly left her seat to use the bathroom. She had done so within moments of the plane being airborne, which was prohibited by air travel regulations. A flight attendant requested that she return to her seat, at which point she became aggressive and created a disruption in the cabin. Kuzman and Fleissig reportedly got so belligerent that the pilots were forced to divert the Los Angeles-bound flight back to the airport from which it had departed. The aircraft was met by Minneapolis police officers who took the two suspects into custody. As Fleissig was being escorted off the plane, he allegedly punched another passenger, prompting the officers to tackle him to the ground. Both Fleissig and Kuzman were initially charged with disorderly conduct, although it was reported that the former, who was the vice president of Citibank, had the charges against him dropped by prosecutors. Shortly after 10 p.m. on January the 3rd of 2017, Illinois woman Jessica Mims entered a Subway restaurant in Evergreen Park and requested to use the restroom. The 23-year-old subsequently left without ordering any food. However, a short time later, she reportedly returned and asked to go back into the bathroom to look for money she'd purportedly left behind on accident. A store employee accompanied Mims to search for the misplaced cash, which they couldn't find. The young woman's behavior then became erratic and she accused the unnamed worker of having taken the money she'd lost. The situation ultimately devolved into a physical altercation between the two. Mims's public meltdown began with her pepper spraying the worker and progressed to her exiting the restaurant and smashing one of its windows. The young woman was consequently arrested and charged with unlawful use of a weapon and criminal damage to property. It subsequently emerged that Mims, who suffered from schizophrenia and depression, hadn't been taking her prescribed medication at the time of her outburst.
Well, I want to...
Just give me a second.
Okay. No, I want to talk to you. Okay?
I know, I will. Just give me a second.
Well, why do you need the door closed? Have you been drinking alcohol? No?
I need my eyes closed.
Why do you need your eyes closed?
Because I can't hear them anything else.
You can't what?
Hear them anything else.
You can't hear them?
Yeah.
You can't hear your eyes.
I can't hear my ID.
You don't need to hear your ID.
I don't need to hear my ID, I just need to know that it's there.
Law enforcement in Weston, Wisconsin, responded to reports of a woman passed out in her car near a local convenience store. On April the 25th of 2022, customers had reportedly alerted the authorities out of concern that the woman, who was subsequently identified as 18-year-old Anna Kostecki, had gotten into an accident. During their first interactions with her, officers noticed that she smelled of intoxicants and slurred her speech. Body cam footage of what followed was uploaded to the YouTube channel Code Blue Cam, where it was viewed over 5 million times. Kostecki refused to present her ID to officers or get out of her car. The teen rambled while looking through her purse, at one point saying that she needed to close her eyes because she otherwise couldn't hear her ID. Law enforcement offered to help her and give her a ride home, but as the conversation progressed, the teen started wailing incoherently. She cursed and insulted the officer interviewing her, repeatedly ordering him to go look for her sister. She then tried to close her car door on him several times before striking him in the genital region. Kostecki remained combative as she was pulled out of her car and handcuffed. She kept screaming and kicking at officers, who eventually placed her in the back of their patrol car. Once the doors were closed, Kostecki started banging her head on the divider and kicking the seat. She was charged with battery on a police officer, resisting arrest, and was also given a citation for underage drinking. On September the 18th of 2022, police in Cheshire, England, were called to a home in witness by the neighbors of Rebecca Cowan. The 28-year-old, who was severely intoxicated at the time, was found by 2 officers at around 4 a.m. outside her home. She was locked out with her 3 young daughters and shouting, "Get out of my house!" at the empty property as the children sobbed in the street. None of them were appropriately dressed for the cold morning weather, and the officers became concerned for their well-being. They offered to help and eventually located Cowan's key. One of them asked to enter the woman's house to ensure that they were all right. Cowan refused and started making threats while shouting at the police to get off her property. As the officers helped her inside, she kicked one of them and tried to bite the other in the arm and wrist. in front of her children. Both officers emerged without injuries from the incident, which ended with Cowan's arrest. Once in custody, she admitted to the police that she became violent when drinking. She had previously been given a 9-month jail sentence at Liverpool Crown Court, suspended for 12 months, for assault occasioning actual bodily harm. Cowan was only 3 days from the end of her suspended sentence when she attacked the officers. She admitted assault and, given her history of violence, was ordered to undergo a mental health evaluation. 2 members of the Kennedy dynasty were arrested in August of 2017 at a rental home near the family's famed Hyannis Port compound in Massachusetts. Law enforcement were called to the address at around 1 a.m. following a noise complaint from neighbors about a raging party that had involved loud music and fireworks. Officers from the Barnstable Police Department were met by 23-year-old Caroline Summer Rose Kennedy, granddaughter of assassinated former New York Senator Robert F. Kennedy. According to an arrest report, she cursed at the police and stuck her tongue out at them. While slurring her words, Caroline told an officer, "I went to Brown and I'm a teacher, sweetheart." She refused to take a breathalyzer, stating that she knew she was drunk. Caroline's father and Robert Kennedy's 9th son, Max, had responded when asked who was in charge of the party and proceeded to display similarly brattish behavior. The inebriated 52-year-old screamed at the police, jabbed his finger into an officer's chest, and smashed a wall cabinet containing glass valuables. After Max had been handcuffed and placed in the back of a police cruiser, Caroline threw herself against the vehicle and flung its doors open. Both Kennedys were taken into custody for disorderly conduct. The charge against Max was dismissed in lieu of a $150 fine, while Caroline's was to be dropped as well after she agreed to follow a counseling program that included community service. In 2019, Australian teenager Chloe Shannon June Power Leo faced a mandatory sentence of 6 months in jail following what was deemed an absolutely disgusting attack on a police officer. 18-year-old Power Leo had been approached by law enforcement in Mandurah in June of 2018. She was severely intoxicated and failed to provide any details when asked by officers. She was arrested but subsequently refused to leave the police vehicle, becoming very violent. As Officer Courtney Hay was struggling with her, Power Leo leaned forward and sank her teeth into her neck. The deep bite instantly drew blood. In November, the teen pleaded guilty to a slew of charges for which she was ultimately sentenced to 12 months in prison, at least half of which she'd have to serve before being eligible for parole. On February the 7th of 2015, 2 women were involved in a violent altercation at a Walmart in Deep Park, Texas. The argument between Alice Keener and Jessica Albitz had reportedly started a day earlier, while the former was working at the Jackson Hewitt kiosk inside the store. Tax worker Keener had reportedly insulted Albitz's husband, but she'd later claim it was a misunderstanding and that she'd made a joke during a conversation with a co-worker. When Albitz returned to the store, she and Keener got into each other's face and traded insults in a video-recorded incident. Then, as tensions escalated, 37-year-old Albitz leaned back and head-butted the other woman. Both then ended up on the ground, where they traded blows and pulled on each other's hair. The fight, footage of which subsequently went viral, lasted only about a minute. As customers intervened to separate the women, Keener, a grandmother of 4, initially declined to press charges, but ultimately decided to do so after a dentist's evaluation concluded the headbutt had loosened her front teeth. Albitz was arrested for misdemeanor assault. Both women apologized and said they regretted their actions in the aftermath, with Keener telling a media outlet, "I forgive her, I forgive myself, I'm done with it."
Come back again. Come back again. Bring him back again.
What's up?
I believe I heard you saying to...
Yes, I did. I'm not going to the...
I believe you... Did you say...
Yes,
me?
actually, I
Did you say that?
Yes, sir, I did.
Oh, you did say that?
I'm not
I
gonna
find you in
lie.
direct criminal contempt. 30 days in the county jail.
In early February of 2013, teenager Penelope Soto was brought before a judge in Miami-Dade County, Florida, after she'd been arrested for Xanax possession. Soto smiled, laughed, and stroked her hair throughout the proceedings as she discussed the offense with Judge Jorge Rodriguez Chomat in a video-recorded hearing. For the purpose of setting the 18-year-old's bond, the judge asked her about the value of her jewelry and other assets. She replied that her jewelry was worth Rick Ross money, a reference to the South Florida rapper, which the judge didn't seem to understand. Rodriguez Chomat urged her to take the matter seriously, telling her, "We are not in a club." The judge set her bond at $5,000, telling her bye-bye, to which Soto laughed and replied, "Adios." Annoyed by her attitude, Rodriguez Chomat called her back and raised the bond to $10,000, prompting a gasping reaction from 18-year-old Soto, who asked him if he was serious. He responded affirmatively and reported with her previous "adios," prompting laughter to erupt in the courtroom. As Soto walked away, she gave the judge the middle finger and cursed at him. Rodriguez Chomat called her back once more and sentenced her to 30 days in jail for contempt of court. The clip of their interaction subsequently went viral. Soto tearfully apologized to the judge a few days later, describing her behavior as very irrational. She also admitted to having taken 2 Xanax on the day of her arrest. The judge dropped the contempt sentence, taking into account Soto's apology, her first-time offender status, her admission to Xanax abuse, and her willingness to overcome her addiction by attending a drug treatment program. On December the 16th of 2014, Oklahoma woman Tia Ann Uten was reportedly making a scene at the Oklahoma County Court Clerk's office. As witnesses later told the police, 25-year-old Uten had been yelling, swearing, and gesturing to employees. She had her 2-year-old son in tow and had placed him on a counter as the scene unfolded. When deputies arrived at the scene, Uten became confrontational and refused to leave the premises. While speaking to law enforcement, she turned to her child and said, "That's right, son. Be a man and kill the police." The boy reportedly fell from the counter moments later but was caught by one of the officers. Uten was arrested on complaints of assault and battery on an officer, obstructing an officer, and disturbing the peace. Her son was consequently placed in protective custody with the Oklahoma Department of Human Services. New Mexico woman Amanda Gonzalez was charged with 2 counts of aggravated assault with a deadly weapon and the felony count of criminal damage to property on November the 15th of 2020. At around 7 a.m., law enforcement in Las Cruces were called to a home along the 1000 block of Chitamanja Road. 25-year-old Gonzalez had driven to the property to confront her ex, who was there with his new girlfriend. The couple and a female roommate awoke to the sound of pounding on the window. They went outside and were met by an enraged Gonzalez, who proceeded to punch her ex before being pushed to the ground. "That's what I needed," the young woman reportedly replied. The trio headed back after the altercation, but Gonzalez then accelerated towards the house and rammed her vehicle into it. Near the front door, her ex, his girlfriend, and the roommate re-emerged and were forced to jump to safety when Gonzalez drove towards them. She crashed into the house once more, leaving a gaping hole in its side and the Nissan with heavy damage to its front. The jilted woman then reversed into a nearby car but ended up stranding the Nissan on rock landscaping in front of the home. Unable to drive away, she tried to flee on foot but was soon taken into the custody of responding law enforcement. Malibu woman Kashmir Duran faced up to 6 years in prison in the fall of 2020 after attacking a security guard in the parking lot of a Pavilion supermarket in West Hollywood, California. In October, 37-year-old Duran was having a heated argument with her father when security guard Natasha Lawson tried to intervene. Duran then reoriented her rage towards the woman and threw a glass water bottle at her. A physical struggle ensued between them, during which Duran caught Lawson's finger in her mouth and forcefully bit into it, causing bleeding. The former also repeatedly launched racially charged epithets at the black security guard. The fight ended up with both of them wrestling on the ground before they were eventually separated. A portion of the altercation was captured on cell phone video by a bystander. As Duran's father tried driving away, with her as a passenger in the car, their path was blocked by staff and customers. In a video posted to YouTube, Duran was then seen throwing dog food at other black store staff and again using the N-word. She was arrested and charged with 1 felony count each of assault with a deadly weapon and assault by means of force likely to produce great bodily injury, as well as 1 misdemeanor charge of violation of civil rights. As of the latest information available to the media, Duran had pleaded not guilty. Adjio faced multiple charges in connection to an attack on a security guard at a Macy's in Danbury, Connecticut. In June of 2016, Douglas Rollman and Gina Peccia, both in their 20s and from New York, were observed trying to shoplift items from the store. Law enforcement was alerted, but before they arrived at the scene, the store's security guard, whose identity wasn't released, tried to handcuff Rollman. It was then that Peccia became aggressive and tried to strangle the guard. In the ensuing struggle, Rollman kicked him in the abdomen before he and his accomplice fled. The police caught up with them in the parking lot, where they found Rollman still wearing the cuffs on one of his wrists and with a stolen pair of men's jeans worth less than $50 in his possession. The couple were taken into custody and each charged with several counts of robbery, larceny, and assault, with an added third-degree strangulation charge for Peccia. In August of 2022, Morgan Hickman of West Palm Beach, Florida, walked out the front doors of the Boca Regional Hospital. Staff then requested that a security guard go outside and ask her to return. The unnamed man found her talking to a construction worker, whom she'd asked for a cigarette. When the guard told 23-year-old Hickman that the nursing staff was ready for her, the woman screamed that she wouldn't move until she got a cigarette. Then, as she and the guard were standing close to each other, she suddenly threw a punch at him. They went to the ground, but the man was able to control Hickman and bring her to her feet. She kept trying to leave and became more agitated upon seeing Boca Raton police. She eventually threw her phone at another uniformed hospital security officer, hitting him in the lip. Hickman was arrested and booked into Palm Beach County Jail on the morning of August the 9th on 2 felony counts of battery on a licensed security guard. While in custody, she admitted to having hit the security guard in the face and claimed to have done so because he wasn't listening to her, adding that she'd only wanted a cigarette. Thanks for watching. Would you rather work as a rodeo clown or as a security guard during a riot? Let us know in the comments section below. Alexandra Jane Jackson, daughter of country music icon Alan Jackson, was arrested in Nashville, Tennessee in August of 2013. Local police had observed a Range Rover speeding and conducted a traffic stop. 20-year-old Jackson, who was in the passenger seat, became irate as an officer spoke to the SUV's driver. She got out and her anger grew when the officer requested that she return to the car. Upon being warned that failure to follow the command would result in her arrest, Jackson, who appeared to be intoxicated at the time, struck the officer in the chest. She then resisted arrest to such an extent that the officer had to call for backup. After she was finally restrained, Jackson told the arresting officer that her father would do anything she wanted, but was promptly warned about any bribery attempt. She was charged with assault, underage drinking, and resisting arrest. Jackson eventually took a plea deal that saw her perform community service as well as take alcohol safety and anger management courses. University of Kentucky student Sophia Rosin was arrested following a drunken, racially charged verbal tirade directed towards a fellow student in the early hours of November the 6th of 2022. The 22-year-old business and marketing major was visibly intoxicated when she stumbled into one of the dorms on the university's Lexington campus. Student Kyla Spring, who was working at the front desk that night, attempted to restrain Rosin from getting on the elevator because she didn't have an ID card with her. The inebriated young woman then called Spring a racial slur and kicked her in the stomach. As was captured on cell phone video, Rosin subsequently tried to run the student employee over with a shopping cart she found in the lobby before biting another student present at the scene. A campus police officer arrived a short time later and placed Rosin in handcuffs as she continued to hurl racial insults at Spring and her friend. Facing charges of intoxication in a public place, third-degree assault on a police officer, fourth-degree assault, and second-degree disorderly conduct, she was booked at the Fayette County Detention Center on a $10,000 bond. In the aftermath of her outburst, which went viral on social media, Rosin was fired from her job at Dillard's department store, and many called for her to be expelled from the university. A Texas woman was arrested for verbally and physically assaulting a group of Indian women in a parking lot in Plano on August the 24th of 2022. According to local police, Badisha Rudra and her friends had just exited the 60 Vines restaurant and began exchanging goodbyes in their native tongue when they were approached by Esmeralda Upton in a video that subsequently went viral on social media. Upton was shown berating the women while using racial slurs and shouting for them to go back to India. The unhinged woman also allegedly threatened to shoot them multiple times, indicating that she had a firearm in her vehicle. At one point, she punched Rudra's wrist forcefully while attempting to make contact with her face. Upton wasn't immediately taken into police custody because the criminal offenses didn't occur in the presence of the responding patrol officers. She was, however, arrested the following day and reportedly faced charges of assault and making threats. After posting her $10,000 bond, Upton was released, pending the continuation of the case's legal proceedings. In the meantime, the woman was sued by Rudra, who claimed that the incident had traumatized her and caused her emotional distress. On October the 19th of 2018, the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department in North Carolina received multiple 911 calls from someone claiming that two people were attempting to break into residences in the 8800 block of Fairview Road. Responding officers were unable to locate the caller, identified as 51-year-old Susan Westwood. They did, however, encounter the two women Westwood had falsely accused of wrongdoing, sisters Lisa and Mary Garris. The latter two had begun recording Westwood as she drunkenly ranted at them about how they shouldn't be loitering in the parking lot. Mary explained that they were trying to get in touch with AAA because their car wouldn't start, but the intoxicated woman continued berating them, at certain points hurling racially degrading remarks at them. When the Garrises uploaded a video clip online, it garnered widespread attention, with Westwood derisively being dubbed South Park Susan. She was also terminated from her job at Spectrum Enterprise, which stated that the incident was a blatant violation of the company's code of conduct and clearly disregards the company's commitment to inclusion and respectful behavior. Local police subsequently issued a warrant for Westwood's arrest on a charge of misuse of the 911 system. She turned herself in shortly thereafter. In the summer of 2019, Westwood entered a guilty plea to 911 misuse, as well as 2 counts of simple battery. She was consequently sentenced to 12 months of unsupervised probation and was also ordered to participate in community support meetings as well as an aftercare alcohol program. Florida teen Tabitha Raitano was taken into police custody on July the 29th of 2018 for allegedly driving drunk and resisting arrest. The case subsequently garnered international headlines due to the 19-year-old's mugshots, in which she flashed a smile and playfully stuck her tongue out for the camera. The young woman pleaded not guilty to charges of disorderly intoxication, battery, and resisting an officer with violence to the officer's person. She was scheduled to appear in court the following month, although it's unclear how her case's legal proceedings ultimately played out. Raitano's high-spirited mugshots were widely likened to those of former California gangster Jeremy Meeks. The latter sparked up a career as a model and actor after the Stockton Police Department posted his mugshot on social media, leading to him being labeled the world's hottest felon. In the spring of 2014, video footage of a topless woman going berserk inside a Pinellas Park McDonald's went viral on social media. Subsequent reports identified the Florida resident as 41-year-old Sandra Suarez, who'd walked into the fast food restaurant on 66th Street North wearing only a bikini bottom. The store's employees requested that she put on more clothing, but she refused and instead proceeded to become increasingly irate and belligerent. At one point, Suarez walked behind the front counter and overturned the cash registers, an ice cream machine, display shelves, as well as other expensive equipment. The police later estimated that she'd caused more than $10,000 in total damage during the course of her outburst, which continued even after the arrival of law enforcement. Suarez reportedly took an aggressive stance and lunged at the responding officers before being handcuffed and restrained inside a patrol car. Upon being taken to Northside Hospital, the woman was examined to determine whether she might have been intoxicated. Doctors indicated that she had neither alcohol nor other drugs in her system at the time, and officers subsequently noted that she may have mental health issues that contributed to her erratic behavior. Suarez was booked into the Pinellas County Jail on charges of criminal mischief and resisting arrest. On December the 12th of 2015, a Florida woman kicked a state police officer at a Deerfield Beach Department of Motor Vehicles after getting into a row with a department employee. Video shot by another DMV goer showed 31-year-old Eleanor Stern having a heated verbal argument with the unnamed employee at the counter. An officer was consequently called over to remove her from the building. Stern was seen on video kicking the officer, who then began to wrestle with her on the ground as she continued to attack him. He struggled to handcuff Stern as she thrashed uncontrollably on the ground. The enraged woman was able to get up and away for a moment as she screamed profanities and insults at the officer. He was eventually able to get a hold of her and remove her from the building. Stern was charged with resisting arrest but was released after posting a $100 bond. Ohio woman Sharice Helena Cleveland had her request to mix 3 McDonald's slushy flavors denied on June the 14th of 2021, to which she responded by launching a rageful attack on the store's employees. The 44-year-old reportedly jumped behind the counter and threw food around as she attacked the workers. The wild incident was recorded by another customer, which provided local authorities with sufficient evidence to arrest Cleveland. The video, which showed the woman berating the employees and daring witnesses to call the police before she eventually struck a manager, went viral after being posted to social media in the aftermath. Cleveland was charged with 2 counts of misdemeanor assault and was released on a $1,000 bond. The arrest reportedly marked the second occasion in which she'd gotten into trouble with the law. In March of 2015, she'd been sentenced to 2 years in prison and 3 years of probation for felonious assault, kidnapping, and disrupting public service, in connection to an incident the previous year in which she'd attacked her grandmother. In letters written to the judge presiding over her case, Cleveland attempted to justify her actions by stating, "Mental illness strongly runs in my family." She also insisted that she'd tried to be a good citizen and had maintained the same job for 16 years before her mother's death in 2014. In December of 2021, Cleveland was convicted of assault and consequently prohibited from making any form of contact with any of the employees involved in the slushy-related altercation. On January the 12th of 2020, former NASCAR driver Candice Musny became irate at manicurist Tiffany Nguyen for speaking in Vietnamese to a co-worker at a nail salon in Oklahoma City. 43-year-old Musny slapped Nguyen and demanded she use English while in the presence of customers. When a witness tried to call 911, the enraged woman allegedly snapped their phone away before pulling out a pocket knife. Nguyen fell to the ground to preserve herself and would later reveal that Musny tried to put the blade up to her throat several times. Upon the arrival of police, the assailant shifted her aggression towards one of the officers, whom she physically attacked. Musny was consequently arrested on charges of assault with a dangerous weapon, resisting arrest, and interfering with a 911 call. After being released on bail, the woman defended her actions during an interview. She stated that she felt her anger was justified because she was paying with American dollars and had asked her 3 times to stop speaking Vietnamese. On February the 17th, roughly a month after the incident, Musny was found dead in her Ski Island residence, and police subsequently investigated the possibility of foul play. After an autopsy, however, the woman's cause of death was ruled as accidental drowning. Las Vegas salon manager Nui Annie Ngoc Nguyen was fatally struck by a car in the parking lot of Crystal Nails and Spa on December the 29th of 2018. It was subsequently reported that 21-year-old Crystal Whipple had attempted to skip out on a $35 manicure bill, claiming that she needed to retrieve the money from her car after her credit card had initially been rejected. After getting in her vehicle, however, the young woman started to drive away, at which point she was pursued by 51-year-old Nguyen. According to eyewitnesses, the suspect neglected to stop when Nguyen tried to get in front of the moving car. She instead accelerated, dragging the manager's body through the parking lot. The victim reportedly passed away as a result of the critical injuries she'd sustained in the violent collision. Whipple then abandoned the vehicle, a Chevy Camaro, she'd rented before fleeing from justice. A warrant was issued for her arrest and she was ultimately captured 2 weeks later by the FBI in Phoenix, Arizona. Whipple had allegedly been attempting to get to North Carolina at the time of her arrest. She later pleaded guilty to second-degree murder as part of a deal, allowing her to avoid facing the potential consequences associated with her original charges of felony murder, burglary, and robbery. On February the 5th of 2021, the case's presiding judge, Tierra Jones, sentenced Whipple to 10 to 25 years behind bars. What was supposed to be a fun party at a friend's house on September the 14th, 2014, in Orlando, Florida, turned into an award-winning female bodybuilder getting arrested after drinking too much. Then 24-year-old Danny Reardon, also known as Little Monster for her crazy strength and ferocity, despite her 5-foot height, is a pro competitor for the International Federation of Bodybuilding and Fitness. After having one too many drinks that night, she started acting belligerent. When her boyfriend of 3 years, Ian Schofield, tried to take her home, she tackled him and shattered the windshield of his truck with a single kick. She yelled at fellow partygoers and even hit multiple vehicles with plants that she ripped out of the ground. Despite her boyfriend's refusal of pressing charges, officers arrested her anyway. While in the back of the cop car, she banged her head repeatedly against the cage that separated her and the officers. Ultimately, she was charged with resisting arrest and battery. Thanks for watching. Would you rather have a supervisor at work who constantly undermines you by pulling rank, or have your annual wages withheld until you completed 40 hours of community service? Let us know in the comments section below.